All right, welcome everybody to a show that we don't have an introduction for, but we've been doing on Tuesdays now for quite a while. So this is something like Sean Channel Coaching on Tuesdays, or some better title that we'll come up with. Thanks, Clover, for letting me know earlier today, just a little while ago, that I had forgot to set everything up. And welcome to anybody who might be showing up this morning who is getting familiar with us doing these shows on Tuesday. And even though I didn't have one already set up, welcome. Clover's joining us from Texas, GunTuber Academy, Clover Tech. Thanks for joining.
Man, good to be here.
All right, so Pest is up here. Hopefully you'll leave me alone. Snob is out there. First one to say hello. Good morning. So we're talking cameras today, taking pictures in 2023, gathering content. Of course, it's a live conversation, so anybody that wants to help us steer the conversation or be part of it, let us know what you're thinking. Cameras in 2023. I think the obvious is phones are super capable. It's my experience recently is with the phones, of course, but
Yep.
There's SLRs, super capable, useful devices. There are point and shoots. I don't think they get enough credit for as useful as magic as they can be sometimes. And then there's super elaborate stuff. What am I missing? GoPros and the action cameras, drones,
Got
one of my favorite things ever, and then
the action.
360s.
Yep. The action cameras are grown 360. You even got camcorder style still. Um, with high quality movie production style stuff, right? I mean, that's still used. You see a lot of those running around shows that creators are using. I mean, if you're talking about whether that's a high speed camera or it's just a studio quality production camera, most of those are they're not like the old days, right, where you had to put it on your shoulder and all of that, but uh, they're still larger compared to any of your other style cameras. And then Snob's got a good point out there. He said he just carries around a canvas and paints the items that he sees, so that works too.
Kind of like witness protect, or what do they call that? The court reporters, where
The
you
court,
just
yeah,
quickly sketch in chalk.
right. The
Pause,
courtroom
and then you
artist,
sketch in chalk.
yeah, right. Yeah, that could be a really fun angle to play at some point at a show. I would agree.
So when you're talking about big stuff, we're talking physically big, but is there a big difference between what you collect with a real, I'm gonna call it like a big, like a legitimate camera, and a, let's say, casual camera like a phone or like a point and shoot? I mean, you're still talking 12 megapixels sometimes, maybe more on a point and shoot device. You're talking really good autofocus and really good um, depth of field and stuff like that. Like what you get out of a regular camera versus what you get out of a inexpensive, more convenient camera. Is that final product in 2023 something to be sought after? Something that's, for the people that we're having conversations with, people that are doing this, are either thinking about doing this or are thinking about doing this differently, is where do you put the investment on a camera in
So
2023?
yeah, so I think there's a couple of ways, and Jeff out there with Gear Report, he says cameras keep evolving. Says I wish it was simpler. Got to do so much homework to figure out what to use in any situation. And so I think there's two ways to look at cameras. There's the completely nerding out. I'm into photography and videography, all the specs and features and WYSIWYGs, right? There's that avenue. I can't hardly speak to that part of it, right? I am not a camera guru in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And then there's the practical way to look at things, like certain cameras perform better for certain functions or in certain situations, right? And so that speaks a little bit. Jeff is kind of bringing both into the mix there. I think the latter is probably the most beneficial to focus on creators. If they want to dive down the rabbit hole of everything, little feature and everything else, plenty of great channels out there that review cameras and coach photography and videography specifically and things like that. When you talk about the difference in cameras, the amount of action, that's why we have the GoPros. The amount of action in the shot, um, some cameras do better, some cameras do worse. That is, an issue when you're talking about video. The number one issue I think that creators are going to end up wrestling with is the lighting issue. That's the thing that I see an issue the most. If you've got a lower light situation, some cameras, be it on a phone or a point and shoot, a mirrorless, a DSLR, whatever it might be. Some cameras, now you can adjust settings. We talked about this on a previous podcast. You can adjust settings like exposure and some of the other stuff to help with that. But with low light, you tend to get a more, almost like a grainier type picture, where you can, it's almost like an old television and it's snowy in a way. I've seen that happen. And then if you get the least little bit of light or the light coming in at a weird angle or something like that. Now there are ways to mitigate too much light. There's ways to mitigate not enough light. But then you get into a whole other ball of wax with that, where that stuff all that has to be done properly. If you're low light, you can't just set up turn on a light and it be done. Depending on, what angle, you can go from, oh, I've got problems because I've got low light, to, oh, now I've got problems because we have too much light in one spot, or it's too hot, right? It's too intense in one spot. And then the same goes with too much lighting, especially if you're filming outdoors. Outdoors can be super problematic, right? So the umbrellas, I don't even know what you call them. Light diffusers, I guess, in the camera world is what you would call those. The umbrellas you set up that can help not only direct light, but shade too much light. And then the lights themselves, or accessories that we may want to hit on, use of those and stuff down the road. But I think that's the biggest thing. I know that over the years, that's the one thing that I have noticed the most and struggled with is that. The second thing that I think, which can be rectified by recording completely separate audio on a completely separate device, but audio input can be an issue too. Some cameras do not have an audio input port where you can run an external style microphone. That's one of the beauties, I think, of being able to use a cell phone is there's all kinds of accessories and apps and other things for phones. And so with a phone, while you might not have quite as good of a camera as you would on especially a high dollar, equal or greater cost camera, I think you've got almost just as much when it comes to various accessories to plug in to connect Bluetooth or whatever. I covered a lot there.
Yeah.
So didn't really mean to, but
well, that's, we don't have a script and we're just kind of talking about things that we're aware of, but we haven't sat down and like decided, hey, let's do a 20-minute speech on it or something. But so the question was, though, as far as, bang for your buck, I think is sort of the question, like, is it worth getting a camera compared to a phone? And then I think the biggest thing I was listening to there, because, when you talk about having a fancy camera, or Jeff said, saw a lot of fancy rigs there at SHOT Show this year. Can't wrap my head around how they get a return on the investment of $10,000 to $15,000 on their cameras. Well, if a portion of what they do is what they do with their camera, but a portion of what they do is their camera and how they work it and where they take it, it's like a camera channel. And then here's what we did this week with our camera, but we're going to be underwater fishing next week, and we're going to be flying around next week, and it's just here's what you can do with your cameras. That's how I could see getting some return on that. On the other side, some people buy fancy car, and some people buy a car that works, and some people buy a moped, and some people Uber. So some people 15 grand just isn't that big a deal. So they
Well,
just peel out the
also,
15,000 for a camera. They don't care that it's a fancy camera. They just had that much money to spend on a camera.
well, then maybe they do care in the sense that, and I know a lot of creators, especially outside of the gun tuber space. I know this is absolutely a fact for a lot of those that they get sponsorships, they sell advertising, they're bringing in money, right? And to mitigate the tax burden, right? Buying a ten or $15,000 camera setup for them is something they can depreciate on their tax rolls, right, over the next several years or whatever. So it's an investment in that, not because they wanted necessarily a $15,000 camera. It's like, okay, I need to mitigate some of this income coming in, right, for tax purposes. I need some write-offs, and why not at that point? Like, I don't necessarily need it, and I don't necessarily want it, but it's just that type of a situation for them. And so
I think we
well,
should
could be.
definitely get an accountant in here, because if that's the position people are at and they're spending $15,000 because of taxes, I can think of 15 organizations that could use $1,000 that would benefit from $1,000 worth of and generated in revenue uh, like that. And if that's something that's seriously an issue, then let's have a conversation with people who need to put tens of thousands of dollars away each year for tax reasons, and let's get them into things that aren't as superficial as a camera that they may or may not even be interested in. But I agree with you, that is probably an issue.
Well, there is a big difference in those deductions. I can't tell you that much. I'm not an accountant, but
Yeah, I know capital depreciation over years, but again, you can
right.
devote capital appreciation to other things.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just
But anyway,
and again, we're talking about non-2A, non-firearm channels. Is the ones I
and
know
why
that have talked
someone
about
might
that.
have an expensive camera or whatever. It's really the question. So I guess going on to that though, compared to the return on the investment again of any amount of income. I mean, I'm thinking of $1,000 camera is a super expensive camera, unless you've got a lot of money laying around. Carrying around $1,000 bill in a piece of fragile glass and electronics on a string that you're constantly poking at stuff and putting in front of things that sometimes blow up, then that's just a big investment compared to, I don't know, $20 camera, $100 camera. So that would be my question, I guess, is even though you get a return from an investment on a piece of equipment like camera in our field, content creation, and then the knowledge that you gain from that camera, the abilities that the camera gives you, so like new opportunities that the abilities give you, and then maybe since you've invested $1,000 or more into a camera, you might be more apt to go do stuff because you want to make a return on that investment. So all of that weighed with buying like 3 phones, because I think what you brought up was a great point, that like you do different things throughout the course of a year, going to an event, going to an outdoor shooting thing, doing stuff indoors. Those are all 3 very common and very different applications for a camera. So what about just getting, a handful of cell phones and making a cell phone
Yeah,
for each purpose?
absolutely. I mean, at the very least, um, well, first let me jump back. You're talking more like the range target cam or whatever, right? A lot of high dollar cameras are in cages behind glass, whatever, protected, and are zoomed in on the target and things like that. So while it appears you'd be like, oh my God, they got their expensive camera, a lot of them don't. And then the dirty little secret is a lot of them are using a decade old camera or something like that up on the target. That's what I do, for example. Right? I've got a phone that by any stretch of the imagination is pretty much unusable today as a cell phone. But the camera is good enough that, as far as getting footage downrange, and I don't got to worry about it. I mean, if you get a ricochet or something. Back to what you were talking about though is, I think at the very least, um, most most cameras on phones has the ability for manual adjustments on the settings, and I think that it it behooves creators to, for the different situations, indoor, outdoor, overcast, direct sunlight, whatever, lighting situation or issue they're having, action, movement, to play around with those settings and even carry you a notebook with you, a little pocket-sized notebook or something, right? Once you find that setting for that particular situation, mark it. It's kind of like, long range shooting and having a notebook, for example. And then you can quickly, oh, I'm in this type of environment today, adjust, 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 and you're there, right? Ideally,
I
though,
just
what
want, I
you're
just want
saying
to take
is
a
if you,
pause and say, interrupt you and say, like, only a FUD would say carry around 3 cell phones and a piece of paper to keep track of the settings on your cell phone.
right? Well, you could put them in a notepad, but you know, anyway. So I'm just thinking dope cards, what I was thinking,
No, I hear you. I hear you.
but if you had 3 phones, right? They could be preset and you wouldn't have to worry about it. You just pull them out and go. You could have your indoor phone. This is the phone I use when it's sunny outside. This is the
That's what I
one I
was going to
use
say.
when it's
You know which
overcast, whatever.
phones
Yeah.
perform for which tasks and just leave them to do that.
Yep. Yeah, set them up and forget about it. But it's still, I think it would for somebody you're gonna have to play around with those settings to get them right anyway. So why not log those, right? Because phones
Make
always
videos
update.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, phones always update, right? What are the chances or the odds that something happens and you have to do a hard reboot or something on the phone, you know, and at least then you can easily quickly put that back, the settings back to where they need to be. But I think most people don't spend time with that. I think most people that use a phone or even a camera for that, a DLSR or anything else for that matter, they literally pull them out and everything is on automatic, you know.
Okay. So that is an interesting element of it. So where do you think, even if you're not going to carry around a DSLR, how important is it to have a DSLR at some point in your experience so that you understand ISO and frame rate and all this other stuff that the old real cameras, an old camera with an optical lens and film and a shutter, all
Right.
these things that we talk about today are emulations of what we had to deal with old fashioned cameras, but they're the adjustments or the characteristics of a camera that, like ISO is how whitewashed or how much light you're letting into the receptor or whatever it's called, and then it'll wash all the whites out. It'll show some of the darks. You go the other way and you drop the ISO the other way, and it'll dark all the darks. It'll muddy all the whites, and then you can get effects like that, but you can also, knowing your parameters lets you know, like what we're just saying, like this camera works indoors, but it doesn't do good at action. This
Right.
camera does action great, but it's horrible indoors because of lighting. Do you think, because it's hard for us to know, I think, because I've had that info. I've worked with regular cameras and then decades later had digital cameras that emulate it.
Uh-huh.
Someone who's starting today and isn't a camera person, is there any value in getting an SLR? And I'm talking this to Clover. Of course, everybody out there we're interested in your feedback.
Well, you mean DSLR, right?
Sorry, I'm
SLR
saying
is
the wrong thing. Yeah, the camera with all the bells and whistles, even if they're
digital.
digital, but just so that
Yeah.
you learn what the bells and whistles do.
Yeah, I think it's important to break this down. We're talking cameras and we have people that understand. So an SLR, right, would be you've seen the Canons, you've seen the Minoltas, you've seen, those things um, that have all the attachments, right? The big long lenses, you put the flash, you got the battery packs, you got all the other things you can hang off of them. SLR just is the film version, the deed, and it's digital. So, um, yeah, I mean, the one thing that is a perk, right? And even if you get an older model, I can't remember the model I bought for my wife years ago. My wife was into photography, and I got a really good deal on eBay. It was several years old at the time. Heck, at this time, it's a decade plus old, probably. Um, but it was not a cheap camera, but it did use all of the SLR, DSLR accessories, right? It was a Canon. I don't remember the model. Well, I say it was. It's still in there. She's got it. So, one of the advantages I think of having that, and I've actually talked to my wife and would like to get her more interested since she does go to these events, um, with the photography side of it, whether that be for, if I ever decide to write Gear Report articles again, or, just to add to my own blogs or um, use for B-roll type stuff or whatever the case may be. Um, and she could actually still use that camera. That's how good that camera is. Um, with the accessories, the beauty of like the DSLRs and stuff like that is you the zoom is the biggest thing, right? You're able to get a really high magnification optical zoom, and then the camera, you can take very nice pictures from farther away. So if you don't have the ability to get up close to things, you've got the fisheye, the wide angles, right? You've got all these different things that for adding photography to whatever your projects might be. Um, I think they can come in handy. From a video standpoint and other niches, you know, well, I guess first of all, other um, there may be creators even in the firearm niche that like I got the DSLR, I love it. That's what I plan on always using. Blah blah blah. Um, aside from like a studio camera, right? Like to me, the DSLR doesn't make sense. The whole what you're going to get from still photos with that DSLR is not, I don't think is going to hold more weight, overshadow, whatever. Um, the lacking in the video side when you're having to lug all of that around. That makes sense. The weight and the bulk and everything else. So I think that's where
Yeah.
the point and shoots, the vlogging, VLOG, the vlogging cameras, which a lot of those are mirrorless nowadays. Um, that's when that sort of stuff is going to start coming into play, or like we've been talking about, the phone. I mean, it always comes back. It seems like to the phone. And nowadays, I mean, every commercial you see, right? I just had an iPhone, whatever the what it was, iPhone 347, whatever the commercial was, I don't remember. And guess what they were talking about in that commercial? They didn't say how well the signal worked. They didn't say how fast it charged. They didn't say anything about playing Angry Birds on it, right? Like they didn't talk about the processor or even the memory. Every cell phone video that you see, what do they talk about? Like every single time, the camera, the camera, the camera, the camera. So, you know, uh, there's a
That's
reason.
interesting. I think that might be fed to you though, because you're probably, if you're a teenage girl, I doubt you're getting camera ads. You're probably getting best of text messaging, best emojis, or something. You know what I mean? Like they're probably you're seeing stuff that they're feeding you for sure, or at least
Well,
the angle
maybe
that they're feeding you, because they're going to feed somebody like, oh, this is the best one for doing work. This is the best one for airplanes. I'm just guessing. Um,
could be. That would be a good, just kind of a good primer for everybody out there in the chat. When you see cell phone commercials, what do you see? Is it
oh,
focused
that's
on the
interesting.
camera more than anything else?
No, Jeff made a point before. Understanding old school cameras is only important if you're using them. So many of the new cameras support audio or auto feature settings that the user doesn't even need to know it. Well, and I understand that's, I guess, the question though, and I understand that point of view. Do you need to know how to shoe a horse when you're driving a car? I mean, at some point, somebody made the decision: am I going to buy a horse or am I going to buy one of these new cars? Right? Am I going to buy a horse and a wagon or whatever, buggy for the family, or am I getting a car? There was a
Yeah,
time when that was a decision, and somebody said, well, I don't have to learn how to shoe and I don't have to feed it and I don't blah, 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 I'm getting a car. So are we better off? I don't know. But I'm just saying, is it worth getting one? And you're kind of talking about at the end there carrying one around, and that's adding more to it. Also, I was actually just thinking more of like go to a pawn shop, buy one, take some pictures with it, maybe sell it back to the pawn shop or put it on the shelf or whatever, but not necessarily incorporate it into your projects just to understand ISOs. Go get something that actually has an old ISO on it and wiggle it, try it from both
yeah,
extremes. Only because it's a knob and it kind of maybe you'll
yeah.
give you some spatial, like some kind of brain thing with, where it comes from on an old camera. But I could
Right.
totally understand somebody saying, no, I don't need to ride a horse and shoe a horse to understand, to appreciate my car. Like I can get that.
Yeah.
And
The
that's the other thing when we're talking 2023, someone who's sitting down to start thinking about doing this, or somebody who's doing it and evaluating their effectiveness or whatever, how much do you need to spend appreciating your craft versus crafting and doing things with your craft, right? Like how much do you have to appreciate the process?
Well, and there's manual settings, even in your phone, right? So I mean, you can still play around with all of that. The difference with the phone is a lot of times they won't call it ISO. For example, they have another name for that setting, right? And so being able to make that correlation, quick internet search a lot of times, or pull up the manual, a lot of times will tell you, what the correlations are between what they call those settings and what they are in relation to the old school photography or videography world. Um, and yeah, I absolutely recommend playing around. To Jeff's point, I don't disagree with Jeff. My point on it is simply that the automatic settings on a camera will usually be good enough most of the time. And so you notice there was a lot of caveats in there. I never said always in that entire sentence. Um, so depending on in other words, there's variables depending on what you're doing, depending on the camera, depending on the task at hand. Um, Other things, could you get the video quality better? Now, Jeff made a point earlier that people will tolerate uh, inferiority in video where they will not tolerate inferiority in audio, right? Um, and that's 100% valid. So when we say, to Jeff's point, that those automatic settings are good enough, um, typically they are. I will say that with lighting in particular, that's where I see the biggest issue with automatic settings is when it comes to lighting. And if you're using your phone in multiple situations, here it can be overcast one day, it can be, and what drives me crazy is why I'm out on the range and it's a cloudy day. If it's overcast, I'm fine. If it's sunny and clear skies, I'm fine. If it's a situation to where you've got the dense clouds that fluffy stuff that keeps coming over every 3 minutes, and the lighting situation outdoors completely changes, um, that drives me up the wall. And the automatic settings in that situation do not work well at all. Now, like we talked about, using the umbrellas, the diffusers, and being able to shade um, the camera itself a lot of times will help in those situations. A little technique that I use, but that's an example where the auto settings, because um, you don't have consistent lighting. It's not consistent; it changes, and so finding a manual setting that's a happy medium on that um, is a more optimal way to go.
Yeah, you said a lot there. The idea of using your stuff, no matter what your stuff is, using it and using it in different locations, different settings and stuff, circumstances. That's how you figure out things like, oh, if I cover my camera, my sensor shuts up and now it just doesn't keep autofocusing the whole time we're out here in a situation like you're talking about where maybe the clouds are messing with you or something, like something's moving or something, that like a tree limb keeps moving in and out of your camera sensor zone or something. So, experience, I guess, time on the clock. And that's where, we haven't really said it, I'll just throw it out here, but, carrying your camera around all the time. So that you can use it a lot impromptu or in different circumstances is where a phone excels. You almost always have it with you. And you just push a button and you're in camera
Well,
mode.
and you know what? One thing that we haven't talked about with the difference in the different style of cameras, and it's a huge thing, and if we're talking about carrying it around, if we're talking about using it all the time, is the battery. Batteries on phones are amazing. I mean, yeah, they wear out, they get worse over time, yada yada yada. But they
Kind of.
also charge quickly,
Yeah, they're
right?
nuts. They're magic. I can't even imagine. I have a unique situation because my phone is however many years old and I just barely walked into 2 year, 3 year old phones. And yeah, they're magic. They are literally magic in that in other respects. But yeah, I was concerned that these phones that have been sitting, there were year-old phones
I
that have been
had,
sitting for more than or there are multiple year-old phones that have been sitting vacant for more than
yeah,
years, and I turned them on and used them all day, no problem.
right. I don't remember how long ago I don't know how long I've had mine. It's a couple of years old. Uh, anyway, it's a Samsung with the Samsung 20 Galaxy 20 Plus, I guess. Um, So a couple of years old, and it was about a year old when I got it. I never get the newest. I'm always a late adopter because of price. So I always wait till the backside of that bell curve before I get my stuff usually. Um, that said, um, this one, I don't think there certainly was never a day at Shot that I had to, and it was being used for the app. It was being used to text, for phone calls, for pictures, for video, whatever, constantly. There never was a day at Shot that I had to charge this. There never was a day period at Shot that I had to charge. Now on the drive, yeah, I had to plug in multiple times with
Well,
that
I mean,
long
you
up on
plugged
the
it in
drive.
at the hotel at night or whatever, but you're
Right?
talking
Yeah,
like
that's
you
what I
didn't have
meant.
to
Yeah, yeah,
stop
yeah,
midday and
yeah. I
carry a
never had
battery
to
around.
use,
And that
never had
was
to
3
use my
years ago
battery
with
pack.
carrying around batteries. Like, it
Yep.
wasn't that long ago that wasn't the same situation.
Well, and I have had my battery power bank, right? And so, but I've never had to use it.
Yeah,
And
I don't even
that's
own them anymore because I haven't had to use them in so many years that I've never
yeah,
replaced them as they died.
yep, yeah, yep. Batteries has gotten that good. Now, if you're talking about larger cameras like DSLRs, those typically have larger batteries, right? And so, as opposed in point and shoots and mirrorless, those as far as batteries have definitely gotten better. But because of the smaller package, smaller batteries, that sort of thing. You gotta think about that sort of thing, right? Do I have extra batteries, or are the extra batteries charged? How do these charge? I mean, do I got a camera that I can recharge through a USB power bank, or whatever? The example of my wife's, for example, the DS, and again, it is a decade plus old, easily. But my wife's DSLR, that Canon, um, she's got, good Lord, I don't know how many batteries she's got. She's got at least a half a dozen batteries for that thing, and has a multi charger, I think, that'll charge like 4 at a time or something like that. And it's got the car charger. It's got, I mean, she's got the whole setup with that, and um, it needs it. I mean, if we were out at that's a crazy thing, and we're talking about pictures, right? She very rarely, if ever, used that for any type of video. But pictures, if we were out um, at a competition, that's mainly what she used it for, was the 4-H, and just getting really good photos at different competitions and practices and other things for our promotions for that. But we were at an all day competition. She would easily go through 4 to 6 batteries in that day, just taking pictures, right?
Because often
Um,
you're somewhere where you don't have a way to take that first battery and charge it while you're using
right.
battery number 2, and then maybe you get
Correct.
into battery number 3, and battery number 1's good to go again. If you're by
Yeah.
yourself or,
Yeah.
without electric, you might need those 8. And
Yeah.
then now you got to also figure out how to charge 8 batteries
And we're
overnight so that
talking,
the morning you got 8 again.
yeah, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds of pictures, right? And pretty much the camera stayed turned on the entire day. So, even standby time, and stuff like that with your DSLRs, and to an extent, the point and shoot, the mirrorless, and that sort of stuff. Your standby time anyway will eat into it pretty heavy too, into the battery life.
Well,
So
and if you're reviewing, what did I just
this
take?
is
Or
true.
what,
The more you're running
that
the
kills it.
viewfinder, yeah, if
Yeah.
it has a viewfinder, the more you run that viewfinder, sure, yeah.
So since you're talking about it,
If
we've
it
got a
has
bunch.
Wi-Fi, if it has Bluetooth enabled, right? Those things use battery too. Same with your cell phone, by the way. Um, if you're in a situation where there's not any Wi-Fi, turning the Wi-Fi off, or if you're not using your Bluetooth for earbuds or whatever else, turning those things off will save you. Uh, and again, I didn't have to turn any of that off, and my phone does great all day, every day. But if you need
Well, it's
that
also
extra little bit,
processing power. Like, why
yeah,
make your computer or your phone or your processor even consider the
steadily
Wi-Fi?
search,
Shut it
yeah,
off. Yeah.
that's turned on, so it's sucking power, and then it's also in the background, right? You're right. The processor and everything is scanning and searching, signals. So
Yeah.
turning that off can help a little bit if you run into that issue.
Just make the cameras faster. Give it its full attention to the camera, whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
Um. Oh, we're gonna hit that one. The other one was okay. Oh, I was going to say with since we got like 6 more questions at least that, or I guess 9 of them are started over here. We'll start hitting those more. But since you were talking about it, where would you
Yeah.
consider, since you've played with cell phones enough, and then you've got the other kind of cameras? What I like about an SLR, single lens reflex, or a DSLR, digital single lens reflex. So that means just a big lens up front, and you're looking through some mirrors through the big lens. And then back in the day, your film also was just being, your mirror moved out of the way, and that's where it, the focal length going right to your film. But nowadays it goes to your sensor or whatever. So what the reason that people use those, other than that's where we came from and people just had them, is that that long lens gives you, well, when you have a long lens on it as opposed to a wide angle, you're able to, like what you described, when you're taking still images of an event where, let's say, someone's at a line shooting, it's sometimes clutter. Like if you got a snapshot camera where it's just going to take everything in focus, you're going to get just a weird thing that your eyes have to start to figure out. With a real camera lens, you can focus on the individual, everything in front of them and everything behind them, everything further away to the camera, everything closer to the camera becomes a little bit blurry, to the point where we're used to seeing that because that's how our eyes work, kind of, and that's how cameras work for sure. So we're used to seeing pictures that way. Can digital phone things emulate that enough now that it's that, or do you still need the real lenses to be able to get that kind of effect?
I think it's getting close. I don't think it's there, right? Um, but I think it's getting close.
My phones have a
Especially with
portrait
the
mode, so if I'm standing next to somebody in a
yeah.
room, I can get that effect, but that's not the same as
Well,
being 100 yards away from me doing
and
something that
mine
I'm just observing.
mine has a few different modes that you can use, and then also it has a tap feature, right? So, like, I can, if somebody's on the line shooting and and I'm filming, I can tap them on my screen, right? And it'll, like I said, it'll mimic what you're talking about with the old school lenses and old school cameras. It'll mimic that a little bit. I still don't. I don't think it's as good. Um, is it good enough? Yeah, absolutely, 100%. But I don't think it's quite as good. And we're talking about my phone. Anything newer in the last couple years? I mean, maybe it is.
All right, so now let's hit into some of the questions that have been starring along the way. So thanks to people that join us live. We do this, one,
So,
because we like to talk about content creation, and two, because we like to encourage people that are either on the fence or considering content creation, or people that just enjoy it. Also, we enjoy having the conversation, and we do it live so that we're not just bloviating here, so that we can react to what people are saying. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say real quick before we jump on to questions because we are on the backside of the hour here. Um, Low light when we're talking about improvements, whether it's battery, whether it's the focus, or whatever it is with the phones nowadays. 180%. I don't even know what number to put on it. Um, they have improved with handling low light. The old iPhone 4S's that I have that I use for target cams or whatever, and then the old Galaxy S5s and that sort of stuff. I say 4S, maybe they're 5S, but either way, um, the difference in how they handle low light in particular is absolutely amazing with the new stuff. So just wanted to point that out. If somebody's using an old phone and it's not handling the light properly, you upgrade that phone, it may easily fix that issue.
And I'm pretty sure the phones I'm using are not like, one of them is pretty nice, but the other ones I'm told are like almost the kind of phones if you went to a store and there's phones around the register that are just not quite burner phones, but like a step up from a burner phone. Like,
Right.
and those phones are amazing.
Well,
So,
oftentimes the phones they give you for free, like, oh, sign up with our thing or extend your contract or whatever, like those are not necessarily the same model. And I learned that when I got my Samsung Galaxy 10 Plus. They had one called like a 10 FE or something. That's what it was called. Which was it looked identical to the 10 Plus. And I was like, but why is it like half the price, And they're like, oh, well, this is the fan, FAN, the fan edition, FE. And I'm like, well, it looks exactly the same. It works exactly the same. And they're like, no, it doesn't. Open the camera app. Open this. Look at this. And I'm like, oh, okay. The memory, the processor, the camera, like the things inside of it, the internal components were not the same, even though physically, and if you were just poking around on it, you wouldn't necessarily know the difference. So you'll be mindful of that too. If you're out there and you're picking up a phone that, all iPhone 23s or all Samsung 22s or whatever are not all created equal.
Yeah, phones are essentially like a desktop or a laptop, even where there's a chassis and then there's a place for the things that you need: a processor, a hard drive, a camera, a screen, and they just plug in the version, the model, the type they feel like. I mean, they got to be compatible, but yeah, so if you've got a form factor of this camera and it can hold a selection of different cameras from the spectrum of good to bad, yeah, they can put a cheesy camera in there and they can put a fancy camera in there, and then that's the same phone model, just with two, like, there's a reason there's two models. One has a really nice camera, one has a mediocre camera, or whatever. I'm sure the camera's probably the big one, but yeah, they could probably do the same with RAM or whatever they call it now, and battery power and that kind of thing. Yes, I was just saying that even an inexpensive camera can be leaps and bounds. It's turning out from a decent camera years ago. I guess that's what I was saying. It's like the amount of tech expansion or evolution is definitely big.
Right.
So T2BRFU, which I can only assume stands for Terminator 2 Barroom Fight Unlimited, or unofficial maybe, is asking, watching to learn some tips for any anti-freedom, non-permissive environments, be it then, now, and or the future. So you said the whole Terminator thing. So as far as filming, where they in an anti-freedom, non-permissive environment, so filming Rogue, you want to have smaller machines, smaller form factors, and subtle, right? Like incognito. I really think there's some 360 camera stuff that would be good for that. And then the GoPro slash body cam type of situations. I mean, I don't really consider them ripoffs to GoPros, but essentially whatever the form factor is for a camera, where, I mean, back in the day, they called them body cams, and then they've called them other things, but they're essentially a GoPro without the functionality of a GoPro. So a standalone camera with no viewfinder. It's just the lens and an on-off button. Inside there must be RAM and a battery, but essentially it's just a little brain, a little eyeball, and a little button, and then in a battery, and then they can be really small. There's the kind of things you can shove into a pen or into a button or something, or just make little GoPros, really solid little cameras to stick on vehicles or in weird places. But I think those kind of things can not only be hidden and inconspicuous, but then also rugged. Problem is, you really got to be good at those. You're either going to be fishing, or maybe even throwing darts or something. Like, you're just either going to be randomly collecting and then hopefully it works. But often body cam, gun cam, dash cam, all these different kind of things that are unmonitored while you're filming are pointing at the sky, or they're pointing at the sun and they're all washed out, or they're pointing at a point on a mirror that washes it out because it's bouncing off the sun, or just they do something wrong, or there's like a big splotch of bird poop in front of it or something, or you drip some honey on it from your hot wings or something. And that you don't know until you go to record it. So that's the kind of thing, just like when I was suggesting for people that are going to figure out their mics or figure out their cameras, go to some other event, go to a gun show, go someplace. Well, maybe not a gun show. They don't like you film at a gun show, but go somewhere where people don't care you're filming. Go to like a dog show or go to a rodeo or whatever. And
if you're practicing your clandestine, filming or something like that, right? And you're undercover filming or whatever. I mean, even if it's restricted to where you're at, I mean, that's what you're practicing, right? So, you can still do it then in a place like that. You walk in there holding your camera up and filming, you're going to get in trouble. I've had pin cams, right? And I've had the cams built into the sunglasses. And I will say this, the modern stuff is so much more better and awesome than the stuff from 15 years ago or something that I was playing with. Like, it's freaking amazing nowadays Just the quality you get and everything else. One thing about the spy, quote unquote, spy cam type stuff like that. I've seen Titacs, I've seen pins, flag lapel pins, all kinds of crazy stuff. And the cool thing about those is you're right, with the monitoring, you got to be careful. But most of the modern stuff will Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to your phone, so
Yeah,
that
if
you
you got
are
that,
able
then
to
that's a whole other
monitor.
story. Yeah.
It just looks like you're on your phone, playing on your phone, right? But in reality, you're filming. So
Yeah, and monitor and make sure your camera, all the things I just said, you're making sure none of
yeah,
that's
because
happening.
if you're
So
monitoring, you don't have your phone up. Whenever you're filming, you're holding your phone up, everybody can see. But if you're just holding your phone in your hand, they don't know that you're not watching the YouTube video or
oh
you're,
well,
you know,
that's a good point, and I'll put it this way because I just know this from work doing things for a long time. You can just hold a phone up and take pictures of stuff. Nobody cares at all. It's like CCW. Everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to carry a gun. Everybody's going to know I'm carrying a gun. Oh my goodness, what is it going to be like for me walking around society? Nobody gives a shit what you're carrying. So you can just go around and take pictures unless you put it in somebody's face or somebody happens to be upset about it and you're looking right at you. Like 99% of the times I've taken video stuff, people don't give a crap that I'm taking video stuff. So
nowadays everybody's got a cell phone and everybody's filming something. You know what I mean?
nobody
So
even cares
that's true.
anymore. There was a
Yeah,
time when that
yeah,
was like, what are you doing? Why are you filming me? What are you going to do with that photograph of me?
right.
People are so immune to that, which I don't think is a good thing, but understand that it exists. That's the society we live in. Your report says, I think viewers will, this is an important one, and we'll probably riff on this for a minute. So Jeff says, I think viewers will tolerate poor lighting more than they will tolerate bad audio. This one is fairly consistent
100% true.
advice.
Yeah.
And well, I'll let you riff on it and then I'll say something. Go ahead.
Oh, I ripped on it earlier. I mean, there's not much
Oh,
to say, but it's like it's 100% true. So, my advice, and today we're talking more about cameras and video than we are audio. But my advice is, if you can manage to have record two audio sources, you know, and I run into that at SHOT Show. This is what's crazy. What, I had 5 SHOT Show videos. I don't even know. I think 5, right? And one of them, the one with lock grips, for whatever reason, and it was just the microphone on the guy in the booth, not my microphone, was catching some kind of interference from something. And I don't know what. I don't know if it was his phone and some kind of frequency, something was running on his phone in his pocket, or if it was somebody across the aisle. I don't know. And why was it only affecting his and not mine? Like, I have no idea why that audio was wonky. And I never had an issue with any other bit. I never changed the setting. I never touched anything. And all everything else turned out fine, but that one. So, you can, and the sometimes, luckily, that audio was not as bad as it could have been. I've had issues where audios went wonky on me, and it was 100% not usable. I mean, there was so much static or so much crazy interference or noise, or everybody sounded like a chipmunk or whatever. Like, you couldn't use that, right? And so, that that may be the one video, the one interview that you worked hard to secure, to nail down the appointment for, or it's just a once in a lifetime opportunity that you had the camera out and everything on at the right place at the right time. Who knows, right? And you lose that especially because of audio. Now, that being said, there are some issues when you deal with audio. I mean, you do have the option to dub, to voiceover. um, that is something that you can do. So I mean, just keep that in mind, that if you do lose the audio for some reason, and that's why I always recommend. We've talked about this before. This is more about technique in a booth or wherever you're at. Get a lot of pictures, get a lot of B-roll, get a lot of stuff like that. Because if you do and you happen to lose audio, at least you can maybe use part of the video that you filmed, plus the B-roll, plus the pictures, right? And do some type of a voiceover thing at the very least, and get that piece of content out.
So I'll just play devil's advocate or the other side of it because I don't do the stuff the same way as Clover does it. If you're going there to get close-up pictures, then obviously they don't care about audio, they care about the lighting. So there are circumstances where the opposite would be true, or at least 10 the other way. And I was also going to say that when, and that's just, I'm not trying to be contrary, I'm just saying, like, there's different people out there doing different objectives with their stuff. So if everyone's going to SHOT Show and getting interviews at the booth, and nobody gets close-ups, nobody gets the, like, what pin is over on the other thing, or how come that prototype at SHOT Show?
You're fading in and out, G. And we may have lost him. Give him just a second, see if he comes back. Stand by. Stand by for the standby. Yeah, I don't think he realizes his internet may have dropped the way that acted, because he was fine. He didn't even robot really. Just faded there for a minute. But I think where he was going was, yep, there he went. He went by. He gone. He'll be back in a minute. Probably had an internet thing. And that's the beauty of. Let's talk about StreamYard for just a second, even though they're not hashtag a sponsor. That's the beautiful thing about StreamYard is if the host happens to have crappy internet or something glitch or power outage, StreamYard stays running here. So, whoever else is in the room can pick up the banner, so to speak, and run with it. So, one of the perks of using something like StreamYard over the native YouTube app. I think what he was getting there was, not everybody's goals as a creator is the same, and I agree. And sometimes, going into that booth and looking at a different way of covering things, I think what route he was going with that can be a beneficial, thing. I mean, that you can get a lot of potentially get a lot of views or whatever just because you're doing things differently. So that was Jeff's with the bad audio. And then Jeff out there, Gear Report. He says, but lighting is super important for studio video, not as much for run and gun. This is true. The more action, that's another thing too. We talk about the previous thing about viewers seldom tolerate bad audio, right? Where they will tolerate subpar video. I think it's another good point here in a way. The more movement that's on the screen, the more viewers will tolerate as far as the video, I think. Not just with video quality, but maybe the production value, what am I thinking? The dialogue, that sort of thing. Like if you've got, a droning kind of, I don't know, what is a pace or whatever to the video. If your audio is that way, right? Not that it's bad audio, it's super clear and they can hear you, but it's just not presented as well, right? The audio side, the verbal side of things. That video can help with that too, I think. But yeah, lighting, studio lighting is so hard, right? The distance, what temperature of light, and we could do a whole show on lights, but what temperature of your lights? I like daylight. I like stuff in that. I don't even know what the rating is. I know it's on a scale of what, like 4,000 to 3,000 to 6,000 or something like that. Somebody out there will probably chime in and give us the technical term for that. I can't even think about it, but it's the temperature of the lighting. Kelvin, maybe rating, but somewhere I think right around in that 5,000 range, 5,500 range is what I prefer. And then I'll diffuse that. What I'll typically do, if you're talking about studio if you're talking about studio lighting, um, being able to defuse things makes such a huge difference. And so, what I'll normally do is I'll use those. I don't even know what you call them. They're like the old school work lights with the metal bowl, and then I'll have different bulbs, obviously for the different temperatures. And then I use clothespins and um, parchment paper over the top. Just clothespin, a couple clothespins and some parchment paper, and put over the front of it. And you can use multiple layers of parchment paper, and diffuse the light down and make it softer, or whatever the case may be. But here's the thing too. This is a crazy thing. Um, and Jeff out there, he's on the Humvee side now. He says studio lighting looks so simple, but it's voodoo. Yeah, that's the thing with studio lighting, is that you've got the lighting aspect, but then when you start playing around with the lighting aspect of things, then you've got to start worrying about shadows, which gets really, really tough. It looks like G might be back with us. You back, man?
I don't know. It's super weird. It's all empty.
You
And
acted like your internet crapped for a second or something, because you just faded, like you were talking and it got quieter and quieter and quieter over the course of like 5 seconds, and then nothing, like complete silence. And I'm like, okay, he's gonna drop in a minute. And maybe not. Maybe he's still got issues. All right, so I'm just going to pick up and run. Maybe he will. Looks like he's might be muted, but maybe he'll get it figured out. DJ says portable Halo and Fresnel units are way cool compared to traditional photography lighting. Yeah, lighting's come a long way. Some of the different light boxes, especially with LED tech and a lot of that stuff. I mean, you can literally change the color temperatures on the fly. I mean, you can do so many cool things. Um, you can get light boxes and even light rings and stuff that, the top half and the bottom half, or the left side and the right side, be a totally different temperature. It'd be a mixture. Uh, all kinds of cool things you can absolutely do uh, with the lighting units, and the portability. I mean, you can get little portable units that are the size of literally the size of a cell phone, size of a pack of smokes, right? Um, that do great on like mobile rigs and stuff like that. Let's see. Good report chiming in some more. Says it used to be important to look like they have good equipment as a means of making them look legit. No, I agree. Yeah, I think that they want that television production. I think that's why a lot of people still use like the big camera equipment and rigs and stuff like that. Um, it makes them look the part. Makes them look like they belong, whatever. But I do also believe, on the flip side of that, we're in a different world now, that they don't, when you're in the companies, that they don't care. I mean, they understand. Like if you come in and you had your cell phone and you told them you were filming for BBC, or you were filming for Fox News, or something like that, they would probably look at you kind of crazy. But you know, um, if you come in and your social media, YouTube, blogging, vlogging, whatever, and you've got a cell phone, like that's normal, right? Like not a problem. Um, I don't know. Maybe G's back now. We're good. I don't know.
yeah, I'm tethering off the phone right now, so I should be in
It
cell
acted
phone.
it acted like it was an internet problem. So basically, still, we kind
What's
of.
weird is I can't see any of the. I'm in here as like a non-admin or something. Oh, there it's coming back. Wow, it's taken all this time to populate the comments, and I still haven't gotten like the starred comments and all that. Anyway,
Just a lot,
go ahead.
just a lot slower, probably, or something. yeah, we just hammered down kind of the lighting aspect. It's kind of what we were
There
talking
we go.
about, and moved on to this one from Jeff. That he said it used to be important to look like you had good equipment.
Oh yeah,
Means
I th-
making yourself look legit. Yeah.
I wanted to hit that one for sure. So you already went off on that one.
Yeah, I said that. Yeah, I think those days are kind of over because and it just depends. Like if nowadays, if you walked into a booth and you were like, "Yeah, I'm filming for BBC or I'm filming for you know CNN or Fox News or ABC," and you had a cell phone, people would look at you like you're crazy, right? Um,
You're
but
saying back in the
walking
day.
in, no, I'm talking now. People would probably give you a look if you said
Oh
something
no,
like
most of
that.
the people from BBC and CNN are just walking around by themselves. They don't have crews. But
Really? Okay.
maybe that's just a specific thing. But if you
I
walk
don't
up
know. I mean,
from
I
the
can
people
see
with the
that.
crews, the people with the crews were like the Outdoor Network and the TV shows that happen because the TV shows still need giant cameras and giant lighting. But
Right.
CNN and stuff are often just reporters. So I think we're just talking nerd
Ah,
differential.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
they're
yeah.
they're not walking around with a crew or whatever. But if
Yeah,
like
they're yeah,
C-SPAN came in, they would have an elaborate thing that would be annoying. Like they would,
probably.
if
Yeah, yeah,
someone from
yeah,
C-SPAN
yeah.
came in with a mic, you'd be like, no, you're not from C-SPAN. But I think that that's always going to be a thing. So there's going to be people who are savvy, and if you walk up with an iPhone whatever versus an iPhone something else, to me, I'm going to be like, oh, you got a cell phone, okay, I don't care. But if you walk up to an iPhone to other people I know, they know exactly your whole rank in the planet based on which iPhone you're carrying around because that tells them how often you change your iPhone and how important having the new one is, if you can afford the new one type of thing. And somebody who can get that, it's sort of like people that can look at your shoes or your backpack or something and determine, where you're at in the pecking order or something. So there's always going to be people that use a
Yeah.
camera for that, and they're going to have their own opinion of it. But just you don't have to be savvy to have that position. You can be somebody who thinks a big camera equals big deal. Like, oh, that must be somebody important because look at how big their camera is. That's always going to be a thing. I think I'm almost positive that's why cameras look the way they do. Some of them,
Yeah.
they don't need to
Well,
look like this and that. They emulate what cameras used to look like and what people expect when they're doing a fancy interview or something. They expect to see all this, but most people aren't going to be satisfied that you can put all that into a candy bar shaped thing and it can look like the thing from Men in Black almost. They just don't want
uh-huh.
that.
Right.
So I think that's a thing. And I think that there are definitely people that carry around big camera rigs because they think that's like, I don't know, carrying around like a cool gun or something. Like, oh, if I carry that around, that's like carrying around a decked out AR. I'm going to get the respect it's due because everyone's going to know how much money I spent on it, maybe, or something, or they're going to see how I know so many different knobs on it or whatever. So to go with that, if you're going to try going down that route, you got to be really able to sell it, right? You got to be able to use the equipment. And that's something that if you've got that skill set and you come in with let's say a more complicated camera rig than somebody else like me who's just using a cell phone, and I might get good camera picture or I might get good pictures. I might not because I'm curious, but not always capable with it for sure. And, I'm learning, but I'm not like passionate about that skill set. So, I'm learning eventually. I'm learning in spite of myself. I'm learning when I make mistakes, but I'm not extra learning, right? But if you're that person who's really interested in it, you're able to go up to a booth and maybe you're a little bit in the way, maybe you're a little bit more, take more time from them. But the results of your end results, like your content, is spectacular and it's got that fuzzy background and the crisp, focus on the subject matter and the lighting is really good and it brings out the detail in your grips or the lack of gaps in your machining work or something, like, you know what I mean? Like you can not just impress them, but like impress them with your content, right? Not just impress them with your camera, but impress them with the content. And that might not be exactly what Jeff is saying there, but I guess I don't want to try to offer an opinion as much as insight because what works for me works for me. And what works for me today is not what worked for me in 2010, right? And you don't want to necessarily, you might want to do what I did in 2010. You might want to do what I'm doing now, but we're just trying to explain what we've done, not what is the way to do it. Who's Cat? Are you muted or am I disconnected again? Now you're freaking me out, man.
No, I'm here. You're good. Yeah, Cat. I'm guessing with probably Global Ordnance is what that is. It says Vastus, his older iPhone, said he needed to upgrade so it doesn't look too cheap. I have never once run into that issue. I'm not going to discount that there's not people out there that notice that and take note of that or whatever. But I don't really pay attention to that. And
9mm shooters are very snooty. They'll judge people based on their technology and on their guns and stuff. Their grip angles. If you don't got the right grip angle, they'll talk about it in the locker room.
right.
All right, so when we're still working, we're at an hour, but guess what? Bonus time. DJ's saying I can't remember what the event was right now, but Jeff at Gear Report had some on-the-fly adaptions with their camera, and he had appreciation for. It showed style and individuality. So I thought some of the stuff, I don't remember, y'all did this. Everybody's done it except for me. I'm pretty proud to say I don't think I've ever connected a bunch of goop to my phone and put it in some kind of a weird bracket. It works. I know what you're doing, and I thought it was super interesting at the time also. And you having done it, you probably still own the stuff or not. I don't know if you have it assembled that way or if you use it for specific purposes. You know what it looked like? It looked like underwater cameras, like what people when scuba diving would use. You guys kind of made land versions of those. So I think that's what he's talking about. And like I say, I don't really have a problem with it other than it looks super fragile and like, pain in the butt. You couldn't like throw it into a bag or nothing really. But what was your experience with them? Do you have them around or is it gone?
Yeah, I've still got all that stuff. I don't know, it has its place. It's great for, steadying and getting smooth flow shots. If you're talking about the gimbal, for example, the gimbal is the one where you put the phone in it and then you're able to control like left, right, up, down movement and all that with like your wrist. So one of my rigs at one time was a gimbal, and then I had a bracket off of it where I could put my microphones and other things. And that was really great because I could shoot in selfie mode, and I put it all on a monopod, and so I could stand it out on a monopod at arm's length, right? And kind of go at an angle, and I could film myself kind of talking with the person that was there. Yeah, I used that for a little while. It worked really well. And then you're talking about the brackets. The underwater scuba diving thing it's literally a bracket. It's an enclosure type thing where you mount your phone, and it's got all kind of attachments for other things. And that's primarily for two-handed use, for just for being more steady and stuff like that.
There's a natural gyroscope or a natural Steadicam when you add mass
Well, that's
to
what I
a
was.
lightweight.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I mean, the technology, we talk about the better technology in phones and stuff nowadays. As far as the stabilization and everything goes with the phones and stuff nowadays, it's getting to the point to where, I mean, you can just hold it and it's just as good. I mean, hold it with one hand, literally two fingers, and hold it up, and it's just as good as running in a gimbal or one of those things, right? It's almost as good. Um, so do I still have all that stuff? Yeah. Um, do I plan on using it anytime soon? No, not really. But it's here, and who knows? One of the things about the gimbal, one of the cool things about the gimbal though, because you can manipulate it with either a joystick on the gimbal itself or by movement of your wrist, right? Because it's got a gyro and it senses that. One of the perks
if
of
you're
it is
like
you
in
can,
a vehicle or something, you don't have to fiddle too much with dexterity. It's going to kind of be adaptive.
yeah.
You're
You can
going to be
literally just
wearing it.
move you move your wrist left or right a little bit, and the phone will move, and it's a gyro. So depending on how quickly you move your wrist, right, it's whether it moves fast or it pans slow or whatever, up or down. One of the perks of the gimbal though, and I know quite a few people that use gimbals on tripods for this purpose because they are filming themselves right? They're a one-man show. Is they will use a cell phone or a camera because they make them for either way. They do make gimbals for DSLRs. Um, they'll use a gimbal on a tripod and they'll enable the tracking feature, right? So that gimbal will automatically, they marry themselves to the frame or whatever in the shot, and then that gimbal, as they walk left, right, whatever, you know what I mean. The gimbal will track them, so it'll automatically move and keep them centered in the frame as they're moving around. So um, there's that aspect. Um, that's nice
Oh,
when you've got a gimbal too.
but yeah, it's essentially having a cameraman, a robot cameraman.
Basically, yeah.
So here's a couple of things. There's a bunch of points that have been made. We'll get better at being more interactive because there's some lag when we're saying something about a past comment and now everybody's commenting it now, and then I'm starring some of these things that we're going to comment on again. So it's sort of a cyclical conversation here. So I appreciate everybody that keeps up with it. Well, no, I lost what I was going to say. So I've got plenty of other stuff to go. I'll keep going. But I guess I was wanting to pause there to just say thanks. I appreciate everybody who's with us live. And if you're listening to this in the future, the non-linear conversation that we're having here, perhaps. So Jeff had said understanding, oh, this is an old one. Maybe it went back and glitched on me. But I think this one we've already talked about is only important if you're using them. So I'll get rid of that one. Combos has a good one here, and I'll probably wait for Clover to get back because that was a good one. So what was it that I just lost here a second ago? I don't know. So thanks for all the good questions, though. I've been starring a bunch of them and flashing some of them up here on the screen. So if you're just listening to this, you're probably missing about a good 60%, and then I'm ignoring the just kind of back and forth, right? I'm not hitting all the just like little jokes and stuff, but feel free to enjoy yourselves. Oh, here's what I was going to bring up, and I don't know if Clover can hear this or not, so I might have to repeat it. But things like the gimbal that he's talking about, the stabilizer thing, you could shove your, I don't remember if he had one that shoved your phone into it or his GoPro, but I've even seen one that's just a little, it's essentially the gimbal out of a drone that you just have on a stick. But anyway, these gyroscope gimbal things, steady cams is what they are. They keep the phone steady, and then they can actually do some extra functionality. I don't remember what Clover paid for his. I think his holds a cell phone, and I think they used to, I can't remember if they were like $100 or $200 or $300. They were significant, but they were also not like breaking the bank. So I remember when a bunch of people bought them, and it's kind of like a flashlight with a little mechanism on top that keeps the phone steady. So that kind of thing, it can be shipped. I'm assuming it comes in some kind of a hard container. My question is, if we did some sort of like gear swap type of thing where people have, or like that bracket thing that we were talking about, where you put your GoPro or your cell phone or both into this thing that kind of just is a whole bunch of attachment points in a circle or a square, and you just kind of add all these attachment deals that hold your phone or your microphones or your monitors or your other things, and then you can attach it to a monopod or a tripod or whatever it is. Some of these things that people have just in a drawer, if people are interested in swapping that stuff. So maybe each month or every couple of months, so that it's not like a complete time burden, but so that people have a chance to experience some of this stuff without having to buy it. And if it's just sitting in everybody's closet or drawer anyway, I'll ship it to somebody, let them try it for a couple of months. Maybe then it gets shipped to a second person for a couple of months, and then you get it back, hopefully in one piece. Nobody abused it. You get it back for the show that you need it for. And now it's had some, it's like the traveling pants, except it's a traveling tripod or something. And maybe we can experience, did you hear any of that? Maybe we can set up some kind of a trade for people that are interested for some of that tech. Potentially with some of the tech like phones too, because you can blank a phone, send it to somebody, or somebody can get it and blank it, however, right, and then use it, do whatever, see its capabilities and its potential, use its cameras and its different tech, and then again move them along. I don't know if people are interested. talk about monetizing. You can be frustrated and never be able to monetize your gun stuff, or you can just realize you can have as many channels as you want, monetize 8 of them, and do your gun stuff without monetization. And if we're looking for stuff to monetize, camera gear, phones, accessories for camera gear, not only is it something that you're going to get paid for on YouTube, YouTube is going to pay you to have 1,000 videos views of that content because people want to be in front of that. There's advertising potential there, but you also have the potential to link to everything on Amazon. It's not a huge cut, but there's potential there, right?
Yep.
Okay, so the next one came up is from Combos. So we're going to take a second and go, first off, what do you think of Combos? You eat those things? We're talking about a pretzel filled with some sort of peanut butter or cheese.
I don't much anymore, and they do got crackers filled with that too, not
Yeah.
just pretzels.
You mean they
But,
squish one into a cracker, but it's still got a filling like a tiny Pop-Tart of
It's
cheese?
got a cracker outer shell with the inside being peanut butter or cheese.
Nope.
I've had those before too. So
Nope. Like little
I
tiny
don't eat
Pop-Tart.
them I don't eat them anymore, but I have eaten them. I mean, I've ate them before, mainly
Yeah.
travel snacks, But
In whatever 1980 something when they came out, I ate them because I was an idiot and I got programmed to eat them, but I regret it. I don't like them. I think they're too fake. Now, if some little old lady from Bavaria or whatever was making pretzels and she used some kind of artisan cheese to squirt in there, I'm eating that. I'm not against eating cheese and pretzels
I
together.
agree with you. To me, yeah, they do kind of got a real heavy artificial taste. I don't know how to explain it, right?
Yeah,
Like,
no, that's it. It's
it just,
cheese whiz inside of a stale pretzel. I'm sorry.
yeah, it's
I'm
just
not trying to diss on your thing, but you brought it up, so I'm bringing it up.
right.
I ate the
There.
hell out of them when they came out. I'm not
Yeah,
saying
me
I
too.
ate a
Yeah,
lot of
I've ate
combos.
plenty. I've ate plenty before. Yeah, but yeah, you're
Hmm.
right. I would agree with that.
They made their money off of me, but it was in the early 80s whenever they first came out. All right. And I'm not saying I even had the choice back in the day. I might have been getting them because that was what it was ever in the shelf in the pantry or whatever. I don't remember how that worked back in the old days, but you didn't get a lot of choice as a kid. It wasn't like today where they marketed to kids. Happy Meals was like the first of that, right? It's a whole nother topic. So phones aren't phones anymore. What percentage of the time do you use it as a phone? Maybe, nothing. I hear you there. However, they have a SIM card and they have an account, and phones are definitely not just telephones anymore. Phones are your access point to the matrix. They are the way that the internet today in 2023 and all of its, adjacent tech, they use telephones as telephone numbers, those accounts with telephone providers as our access points. Those are literally, like when the matrix picks up a telephone, when we get onto the internet, that's you. So you may not use it as a telephone, but that's your gateway. Now, that may or may not be a big deal to you, but that's a significant chunk of the fact that we're talking phones here. But anyway, Clover, I don't know if you want to hit on that and how much a geek we want to get into the phone being a phone.
Well, I was gonna pull up and just see how many hours, like yesterday or the day before or whatever, I spent on the phone. I definitely use my phone a lot, hours a day as a phone. So I would say, and I say hours, so like 2, 3 hours total a day. I'm on the phone that much.
I don't know how you do that. So I have to do that on a couple of phones now, but it depends, I suppose. If I've got stuff going on, but if I got my phones laying here. So if I'm waiting for something to happen, something to render, something like I just got disconnected. If this was a different type of situation and I didn't have to rush back in and I wanted to wait 5 minutes to let my internet settle off instead of right now, my other internet, my real internet is glitching all over the place. I can tell from the lights over there. So they're probably working on something in the neighborhood, right? So if I was not in a big hurry on a live show and I was farting around, I might jump on my phone and distract myself or do some Instagramming or something. Schedule some live shorts, or not shorts, live shorts, but schedule YouTube shorts. And that would be phone use, but you know what I mean? It's not like
Well, I meant
consistent.
as a phone, right? I mean, I'm hours a day. hours
Talking
a
on the
day I
phone.
talk on the phone. So,
Oh,
mine
that's
is being
no.
used. Mine is
You
being
have
used
to.
as a phone.
I do almost exclusively what we're doing right now. I'll open up a dead room,
Yes,
one of these
I
rooms that are
realize
dead,
you
and
do,
then we
G.
bring
I
people
realize.
in.
I
But
totally
yeah, I
realize
know.
that.
But I'm just
Now
saying that's definitely a preference thing.
I don't. Very rarely, if ever, do I play games on my phone. Obviously, I film on my phone. I don't edit. I film and take pictures on my phone. I don't edit. Um, but I would say that the talk time, my talk time on the phone, text messages aside, my talk time on the phone, it definitely rivals any other activity I do as the most I do on my phone. Some days it's not that much, but other days it's balls to the wall. I mean, there's so many people calling in and doing this and doing that and whatever, and then you just got the talking with a buddy thing, you know.
Well, that's the thing. Exactly. It's just how people use them. Because if you got two people that do talk on the phone, they can turn it on speakerphone and just BS. That's the same as Echo
Yeah,
and
or
AR
Bluetooth
guns going
or
live
Bluetooth
and
today.
BSing on the Bluetooth. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
think of that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Just put
That's
your
something I
Bluetooth
got to do
earbuds
because
in.
I
You can
I got a
you
set
can
of
be on
those
the work
earbud
site.
things, and I forget that you can talk into them. So yeah, you can just be farting around doing whatever task, vacuuming, cleaning the
Yeah.
swimming pool,
Yep.
knocking the palm fronds off the top of the balconies, all the
Yep.
stuff you got to do on a
I
daily
was working
basis.
on I was working on the studio setup for the new podcast, talking with Ghost last night. So or
If you
yesterday.
don't,
So
the help can never polish the Ferraris right. I'm always out there having to repolish the Ferraris. So having
I
Bluetooth.
know, right?
All right. So
Horrible. It's terrible, man. Terrible. Or
the
stacking
internet.
all my gold up. I mean, every now and then it gets the
I don't even like
stacks
them
get
touching my gold. They never do it right. Yeah.
it gets
Exactly.
so high that it falls over occasionally, and you got to go in there
I'm
and
gonna put it
restack all
inside.
that.
I keep threatening to put my gold inside at some point, but
I don't want. Well, I don't. I'm afraid to put it inside because then if the stack falls over, it'd be like a J.M. Davis, and I won't be able to get into the room to get to my gold.
oh yeah, see exactly.
So yeah,
All right, so their internet cameras loosely connected with a phone number. I guess that was the follow up to the other one, and we kind of addressed that. Yeah, exactly. They're your internet access, so have many accesses to the internet. I have a Chicago Mike is saying I have a GoPro 8 and it works great. I think he also followed up with the battery life. So I only have a GoPro 3 or something. It's an old one, but I don't know. I hear such back and
mine is
forth, like such
dead.
hot and cold reviews of them.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of stuff lately that people are moving away from GoPros, and I haven't really followed up, but I have seen several videos pop up and stuff with people claiming that. Now that just could be a clickbaity thing, who knows? But my GoPro, which I don't, mine's like a GoPro Hero Plus or something. It's pretty old. It's dead. It needs to get thrown away. It's legit dead, unfortunately. So, and that's the only GoPro I've ever had. Um,
Is there any
I
value in them as parts or whatever?
I don't think so. I don't think so. But the problem that I have with a GoPro is a personal thing. I don't like the fisheye looking. All of those action cameras are that way, and like for that type of footage, you're like surfing or you know mountain biking or something like people are used to it. It's like okay, but that where it all bubbles in a weird angle, I don't like that. I do not like that. So um, even when it was working, I didn't use it just a whole heck of a lot, and that's why it's like aesthetically the I don't even know what you call that, right? The way the picture shows, I just don't. It
Yeah, I
ain't
think
my
it's
thing.
just yeah. There's
Yeah,
probably some like perwaxive way of saying it or something.
yeah.
I don't know.
I
Yeah.
just like a regular camera view or whatever.
Um, So what they're awesome for is like, let's say, well, okay, yeah, getting off on a tangent. We're an hour or something into it, but I hear you. I can understand that because that's definitely a characteristic of them. I think that there's some software that can delete some of that, and then they've got some other aspects like stabilization. But if it's sitting there on a tripod, who cares about stabilization? Um, sorry, dog's sleeping over here. With subpar camera lens, the software is doing all the work. Or even with the subpar camera lens, the software is doing all the work. We're talking cameras. We're talking,
Yeah.
you know,
You can do a
creating
lot with
content.
software nowadays.
I mean, we haven't even talked about it, but I guess the rule of thumb is, in general, get as highest quality of content as you can. Get good at collecting the content so that it's usable. But the assumption is so that you can edit it, so that it's good for editing, so that you have a lot in the editing room. But I mean, I guess technically we can talk software, we can talk techniques, we can talk about targets. All of these things are factors when we're talking about the other side of collecting content or creating content.
The better the source material is, right? The better everything after that's going to be. You know, and that's regardless of what it is. Well, you could be
I don't
doing
know. Do you want
research.
to do software next week right away, or maybe start making up? I can make up
I
a
don't
thing
know.
over on Gilded and make up a calendar and kind of put that a couple of weeks out so that we're not. If we're going to be talking
Yeah, I
about
don't know, but
content
we can
creation,
talk
it
about
doesn't. We don't like rub it into just video or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of software to talk about.
Hey,
But yeah, whether you're talking audio, video, or, you know, like I said, even a research project, you know, the more time you spend with the source, you know, the better everything afterwards going to be. If you talk to, you know, let's just take the SHOT Show example, the creator example. You walk into a booth, you talk to the salesman, right? That's a much different thing that's going to happen with your interview, your conversation with him, and the content you produce on that product than talking to the inventor, right? Like, the inventor is the source, like, you know, so it's the same way.
Oh snap! Snob says you can click the button and fisheye turns
Mine
off.
did not have that option, Snob. You're talking about, I don't know how old it was, but you may know it was a GoPro Hero Plus. It didn't have an option to turn off the fisheye.
Oh, that's an old one.
Yeah.
And then Speed Limit 155 is saying you can get a decent knockoff that do a good job for like $40. I found a $6 GoPro at the thrift shop and I bought it as a gamble, and it is so awesome. The battery life is 1,000 times better than my other real GoPro that's old. It's that GoPro 3 or whatever. But I don't know if it'll Bluetooth to my phone, because my GoPro I can look at on a phone app, which is super cool, right? You can see what the GoPro's looking at with your phone app. But yeah, that $6 one is super neat. And plus I don't want to ruin it, but if I got to put something next to a Target now, you know, is it a real camera or is it that $6 one I got at the thrift store?
Yep.
I just wish I could get more of them.
Yeah.
Gear Pro, or Jeff is saying, Gear Pro, gear-report.com, or Jeff is saying, I use a GoPro for, is this just Jeff or is TJ out there also? I use a GoPro for backpacking with scouts where I don't carry a phone, and for sailing where I need a waterproof camera. Other than that, I don't use it at all. So I get that. I mean, they're neat. And I would just add, I would think it'd be cool to put it all on the vehicle. I don't know if he's still doing vehicle stuff, but you know, having vehicle mounts or magnet mounts or something, suction cup mounts, like what Charlie does, I guess. Doesn't he use GoPros for what he's doing, riding shotgun with Charlie?
Yep.
I bet you that's what he uses. So, you know, for those kind of uses, I could see him. And then he probably puts a phone on with those mics, like what you guys use with the clips. I think I have a set now, so I can start saying like what we use. But where you plug it into your phone and it records.
Seemed like his mics were plugged into a camera, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Well, but either way, he's got some sort of interview rig going with GoPros. And that goes into the next question. Sorry, I've been kind of bouncing back and forth again, not real linear here. We're bouncing to some of those questions or responses to what we were talking about. But going back to an earlier comment that we starred, Speed Limit saying utilizing multiple camera angles and slow-mo brings a lot to a video as well. Makes video editing easier with breaks. So that's sort of what I was holding back on earlier, is that we're talking, and I think we've done a massive assumption here, and we're talking individuals, right? We're talking maybe Jeff's got a different situation because he's got more than one person on the crew. In the day, I've had up to 7 people go to SHOT Show, and that meant we were doing all kinds of stuff. Like people were on the computer the whole time, people were booking it around, people were doing stuff. People were collecting still images. People were collecting video. Like, that's a whole different thing when you've got tasks and you've got people that are doing what they like and they don't have to do any of the other stuff. It's a whole different thing. That's how you get 350 videos out of SHOT Show. So that element of this, we're talking an individual. So
Yeah.
I guess I'm taking this a little bit, but what we're talking about with a camera and what a camera can do, this, I can imagine that some people who are individuals, doing this alone or at a time when you're doing it alone, might go, oh, this is just too much, or I can't keep track of all this, or this just doesn't interest me. But when we're talking about the strategy of collecting content and the techniques of collecting content, you've got a tool, you've got a device that can collect data in multiple ways. And with a camera nowadays, panoramic, slow motion, I won't even get into all the things because there's lots of different ways that these magic devices can record the moments that you paid a lot of money, you put a lot of effort and devoted to get to. You want to record that in as many ways as possible, not necessarily because you are going to run through how to edit all this stuff or like figure it all out. But now, what if you're able to give that to somebody 6 months from now? Or what if 6 years from now you can go back and go, oh, now that I know how to edit, I do have a panoramic from that range day. And now I know how to incorporate that into some blends or fades. I don't know the words, but I can edit and do whatever wizardry to make it look cool. So sometimes you're recording for a team or you're just your future, more competent, more able situation.
Well, it gets into and we're talking, and I'm going to expand beyond going to an event, but we're just in your regular content out on the range or whatever. Every now and then I will do a multi-camera, set up 2 tripods, 2 cams, in film. And I totally agree. It's a great look. I love the being able to swap back different camera angles. And one of the perks of doing that is something that we talked about earlier, maybe before 155 came into the chat here, but we talked about movement on the screen, keeping people's attention. If you're just standing there static in front of one camera, there's no movement, and you're talking, especially having multiple camera angles on that and switching back and forth between those creates movement on the screen where you're not moving yourself. It does create those changes. And so, and it just, I don't know, it just looks good. I love the multi-camera, multi-angle approach. And you can simulate that, of course, by filming different parts at different times and moving things around. That's why outlining your video structures and stuff like that sometimes can help, right? That way okay, from this angle, I want to film these parts. From this angle, I want to film these parts, right? And once you put it all together, it's a consistent flow. But while you're filming, it's like, it's not natural. So, and sometimes you have to do that. But if you think about it, that's the way movies are done. Sometimes they'll go in and the very first scene they shoot's the very end of the scene of the movie, like that's just the way it is. So, yeah, planning that out, thinking about that, how you can mix it up, I certainly can't help. I don't know if did we lose you again, G? I show him muted. He's muted. The puppy's sleeping. I don't know what's going on here, but we will continue. Let's get a couple of starred ones here. Jeff, multiple cameras make editing exponentially more difficult. More storage needed. Faster computer with more memory. Lots more storage. Way more time editing. Yes and no. I find that it's a matter of getting down a rhythm. Now the storage, obviously, you're twice as much content. I get it. Faster computer, memory, possibly. Yeah, I get it. I haven't had storage, obviously. The faster computer, more memory. I really had any issue going, 2 camera angles or whatever. No more than I would by inserting B-roll, which is essentially another camera angle, right? Um, for me, what I will typically do is I will identify which is my primary camera before I start and which is my secondary. My primary goes in the main timeline. My secondary goes in a um, in another timeline up, and I guess G-Webs is having problems. Goes into a separate timeline. And then what I will do is I will go through before I add any B-roll, before I add anything else. I will go through. I'll sync those up because obviously the audio, everything needs to sync. You don't want to look like an old Chinese movie. And um, then I will go through and I'll clip the secondary camera. I'll clip just the sections. I'll clip everything out where just the sections I want to keep of that remain, and then I go back and fill in. And it's actually easier in a way for me with my software because I can fade the front and back of those secondary camera angles, and I don't even have to input transitions there. It's not like putting a transition in the main timeline. But again, you're talking about my software and all of that. What I'm saying in the simplest form is that once you kind of get down a strategy or a rhythm on how to edit the multi-camera angle, it's not that bad. Now the whole computer thing, I'll concede that. I mean, that could potentially be an issue.
All right, I think I'm back on my good internet now. Sorry about the glitchiness. Nancy Pelosi ran in here, started messing with all my wires and tubes, and then ran out. I couldn't help it, so I had to fix everything. Am I back? Plus, people don't look at you funny when you walk in the bathroom, like when you carry a big camera rig with you. That's,
Yeah, you're back.
He's being funny, but that's a legit thing. I haven't actually had to deal with this because the years that we did bring fancy garbage, I don't say garbage, when we brought a bunch of fancy stuff because there was a perception that having fancy stuff was, there was a time when having fancy stuff helped grease the wheels. Oh, you've got some fancy stuff, you must be legit. Of course you can take some of our time and attention, right? So it did help there for a little while, but then as technology changed and people weren't impressed by it, you didn't need all that fancy stuff. So I have experienced a couple of SHOT Shows with quite a bit of equipment, but that's why we had a lot of people there. But one of the advantages of having a lot of people, or one of the things, is you don't encounter that because somebody's going to always hold your stuff. You're never walking into the bathroom with all your stuff because you're with 3 other people. So for people that have been on their own and carrying more gear, is that a nuisance? Is that just really just a joke, or is it something that's actually something you got to deal with? Because you can't just leave super expensive equipment laying in a hall or something.
Trying to get to my mute button. Yeah, when I had the rig on the gimbal and the monopod, I would have to try to leave that at in a booth or something. You know what I mean? If I had to go to the bathroom or whatever, it was kind of a pain. I definitely don't want it. If you've ever been to SHOT Show in the bathroom floor, I'm talking about on the show floor, like the other bathrooms in various parts of the facility, not necessarily, but especially the SHOT Show bathrooms in the main hallway or the main ballrooms, venues, halls, event halls. Pretty bad. The floor is. It's like definitely don't want to set anything down on those floors, or I wouldn't. So, and then even if you set something down on the floor, but I remember NRA in, was that in Indy or was that in Dallas? I don't remember. One of the two. It was the one in Indy, as a matter of fact, which we're going back to here again in April. I actually broke a gimbal. I had set it down at some point and I didn't even notice it. And I don't know if somebody stepped on it. I don't know if it fell awkwardly, slid awkwardly, and I didn't realize it. But where it mounts to the quarter by 20 threads part, where it mounts to the tripod or the monopod, that whole bottom section busted out of it. And So yeah, that is an issue when you have equipment. You've got to, and you're by yourself, especially. Like, what do you do with that? And
I was
so,
going to add that even if you're not at SHOT Show or something, if you're just at a range or if you're at a gun show or something, the
right,
bathrooms aren't known to be fancy with some attendant who holds your stuff while you do your business.
right, right, yeah. And if you lay it on the counter, you're subject to somebody splashing water on it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
even if they're not horking it, they're not they don't understand what it is. So yeah,
They're
it's
not
just a
paying
thing.
attention to it. It's
And
not theirs. Yeah,
just a thing, and sometimes it can be accomplished with something as easy as the inexpensive bags you get at SHOT Show. They're 2 notches above disposable, but they're very inexpensive. They just hand them out. Something like a Condor bag or the one that the orange bag that what do those guys always hang out downstairs with that pistol company? They gave out an orange bag, LF something, LFA.
yeah. I don't know. But you got the SAR bags, which have been everywhere for the last.
Well,
couple
that's way
years
too
too.
big. That orange bag is actually one of the best bags ever for what I'm talking about. But you have this, I'm going to just go grab one actually, and I'll show it to you on the camera here. But you get one of these inexpensive bags, you keep it with your gear, and when necessary, you put your gear into the bag, and that can be hung on a hook. That can be, hung on a
That's true.
pipe or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm going to go grab the bag and you'll see what I'm talking about. They
Yeah.
basically disappear in your kit.
That's valid.
Yeah.
Of
But
course, if you got enough room in your backpack, you could do the same thing.
I'm just saying, yeah, as opposed to a backpack, but yeah, you could definitely, or attach it to your backpack. A carabiner or something accomplishes essentially the same thing. So anyway, thanks for bringing that up. I mean, we were kind of kidding around or whatever, but there's really good stuff here, and hopefully this is helping people that are, again, either creating content, getting into it, or considering it, and if nothing else, just a way to kind of chat about some interesting adventures that we've had. What the hell is that? So Weston says stabilizer software is so good these days, and that's something I haven't played with, and I don't know. It must be in Premiere somewhere, but so I just don't know if I have to plug it in or if I have it available. I just haven't used it. With the drone stuff, I started to, but the drone footage is the only time I've really done any kind of incorporated hardly any kind of action footage. I almost exclusively do live or just pointing the camera at some subject on the table. I almost never need to do stabilization. So anything you want to add to the stabilizer stuff or any ideas or tips or anything?
Not really. I mean, Weston's right. I mean, the tech in most cameras and software nowadays, and our cameras and phones and stuff nowadays is great as far as stabilization goes. It's good enough. I mean, and if you don't think so, I was been watching what is that, Last of Us on HBO, and zombie movie, by the way, and our zombie series. Anyway, um, and I've got to where I pick up on like stabilization, and especially when like they're running behind people that are running, right? That stuff's all over the place, and we're talking about major production on HBO. You know what I mean? So like, you know, at the end of the day, is stabilization even that important? Considering that we have major motion pictures that when you have action scenes and other things going on, it's not that, even when it's a still shot, you can see the camera move. And let me give you an exercise. Anything you're watching, Netflix, whatever, subscription service, the regular television, pick out a vertical or a horizontal edge or line in that movie frame somewhere, be it a doorway or whatever, and roll and focus on that part in relation to the edge of your TV screen or your computer monitor or your phone, and you'll see all that crap moves. Like even major productions, there's there's all kinds of movement that if you're paying attention to the content itself, because you're watching the actor on the screen or whatever's going on with the fight sequence or whatever it might be, right? That's what you're focused on. It's what you're watching, right? And so you can get away with a lot as far as stabilization goes. Um, just just by that, just by what you're paying attention to. And we lost you again. Good Lord. Hopefully he'll be back here in a minute. I'm going to hit on Anne Marie's out there real well. There he is. He's back. Maybe. Maybe he's back.
Okay, well, my little dude is telling me in no uncertain terms that it's time for him to go outside. So he's been really good at telling me. I'm not gonna, I'm gonna take him outside basically. So riff on something. I was gonna say, Anne Marie had asked about
Yeah, she's got a good question.
targets, and I got something to add to that. But take a second and then riff on that. I got a little dude who needs to go to the outside. I'll be back.
Yeah, I mean, I dropped a link out there. I think Krabby dropped a link out there. The answer to that question, can we print our own practice targets? It seems they charge you for every little thing. Yes,
Hold
you
on.
can.
Keep in mind she's in Massachusetts. She's new to shooting and going to the range with her new gun.
You
For the
didn't let
first
me
time.
finish. I got one sentence out, dude. Like,
I know, but I'm just throwing that out as a caveat that she's going to indoor range in Massachusetts. They may have rules or something.
well, the first part of that is, can we print our own practice targets? And the answer to that is yes. You can print all kinds of targets in all kinds of places. There are also places that have targets very, very reasonable. Now, depending on the range you're going to, that may be the requirement, because some ranges, that's how they make their money or whatever, right? That's where they get you, I guess, if they want you to use their targets for whatever that reason that might be. Um, they don't want you bringing reactive targets. They don't want you bringing steel targets, and they don't want you bringing your own paper targets. So it's something that you would first need to ask the range, right? Um, and like, hey, are you okay if we do this? If they say yes, then they may have some requirements on that. So when you're talking about printing your target, they may say, yeah, you can bring your own targets, but they have to be a certain size, right? And if they got to be bigger than 8.5 by 11, right? You're going to have a tough time printing those targets. Um, but there's a lot of places out there you can print a lot of cool targets. There's all kinds of games. You can print targets that are different kind of games you can play. That's a section of my website I had one time, and it was actually targets. I've made a bunch of targets, uh, my own targets before for youth shooting sports purposes to help with certain aspects of competitions and stuff like that. Um, and so I've been meaning to get those up for download on my website. I just hadn't done it. So thanks for that question. That's something I need to work on and get up. But there's lots of places if you just do a search on it. NSSF has some, and there's tons of other sites as well that have them. Now back to the what the range allows and what they don't, right? So if they say you have to have a certain size or a certain kind of target, uh, and they don't care as long as it meets those dimensions, um, let me throw out there Outdoor Products Plus, and I don't have an affiliate link. I don't make any money when you go there and get anything, but that is 99.9% of the targets I use on the channel, paper targets, are Outdoor Products Plus, and the reason is they're cheap. I think if you buy $50 worth of targets from them, it's free shipping, and $50 worth of targets from them will last you a long time. That's for me, $50 worth of targets is probably 6 months to a year. you know, and I shoot almost every day. Not that I use paper targets every day. So there's some cheap options out there, I guess is what I'm saying, if they allow that. So, and they offer the full size silhouette targets all the way down to various bullseyes. Talking about Outdoor Products Plus, so they like 18 by 24 all the way up to like 18 by 36 or 24 by 36, various sizes and stuff like that. So whatever, if that range says, oh yeah, you can bring your own, but they got to be this dimension. Maybe look into that. I would venture to say it's going to be cheaper than the range, because I get what you're saying. Most ranges that I know that require you to buy targets, they charge like $1 a target, and that may be minimum. But that, yeah, that's my take on that. And then if you've got, somebody that has land and stuff like that, I mean, it would be worth printing. Here's the thing for printing, though, too. Um, yeah, Jeff out there says they've got a page out there, gear-report.com. But there's lots of places to get them. But yeah, the what was I gonna say? It was something that the road I was
Printing
gonna go
versus buying them, you mean?
Yeah. So I've got if you've got an inkjet printer, keep in mind you go, oh well, it's cheaper to print my targets. Is it really? If you're talking about an inkjet printer on just an 8.5 sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11, um, I don't know that it is, as opposed to buying some type of bulk pack online. And especially if you get into larger targets where you don't have the capability to do that, right? Um, because I have ran now for the longest laser printers, and even running laser printers. I print some more, like I said, special purpose. And then what I would do, because I was talking about I had my own designs and stuff, I would get my design down and use my printers for that. But then I would usually go and get, because I would need hundreds of them, right, for whatever said competition or practice or whatever it was for the kiddos. And so I would usually go get copies made, like donated. Like, hey, will you donate 100 copies, for this? Now I know you don't have the capacity to do that, but I'm just using that example to say there's a reason I did that. And the reason is like ink toner. I mean, all of that wear on your drum and your print heads and things on your printer, depending on how many you print and how much you shoot, could be a problem. If you just need one every now and then, it's not going to be a big issue. But um, yeah, buying is better than printing in a lot of different situations, I think.
So I don't know. You probably said stuff because I was out there trying to let the dog go. But
Yeah,
one of the things that
I just thought mainly how if even if the range will allow you to bring your own targets, right? Which is obviously is a question. They may have a requirement as to the size, like the dimensions of those targets or something. So
well, in the thing, like an NRA range isn't going to let you have hands or any kind of facial features, and then other ranges will have their own whatever they want. It's their businesses. So what I was going to add is that a lot of people don't think about it, but if you're the range and you've got a whole bunch of different people showing up to use your rental ranges, your lanes, it's like a bowling alley or something, right? Like your customer isn't the individual, it's a whole bunch of individuals all the time. And some of them show up all the time, and some of them show up once in a blue moon, right? And the people that show up all the time, the people that frequent the range tend to understand this. So I'm telling this mostly the people that don't go to the indoor ranges or only frequent it once in a while. But the people who own the thing, who are paying, who are there all the time and have to deal with a lot of different people, they may have found that if you put up this target, it bothers people. And if you put up that target, it bothers different people. And if you put up that target, it offends somebody. And they're allowed to say, I don't want to offend people. So don't shoot that target here. And it becomes a lot easier to say, these are the approved targets. And sometimes, it's perceived as, oh, whatever. Well, sometimes it's like, you know what? We're here all the time. You're not. And you haven't seen everything that people comment on in our feedbacks things. So there's some reasons for that stuff. And then there's just people that are the opposite, that are like, we buy these targets cheap, or we work with this company. But maybe the reason is because we buy the targets from this company because 50% of the profits goes to veterans support or something. So I just wanted to throw some insight out there that it's not always obvious why they have their policies, but you can also question them. You can ask them, hey, why is the policy like this? And if they go, oh, we've never even thought about it, go ahead. Sure, we have the policy, but no one's ever asked us about it. So for sure,
yeah,
go ahead and do something else.
yep.
Maybe the
Now,
policy was grandpa's policy and nobody's ever questioned it.
yep. Locks out there, I love it, and I was doing some cleaning up and kind of combining some targets that have gotten strewn around, and yeah, I've got multiple stacks of multiple size paper plates. So paper plates are depending on the purpose at hand, what you're doing, of course. Paper plates make really good targets on the cheap. I would agree.
Thrift shops and secondhand places that are reusing, like if you have a Habitat store where they're repurposing stuff, You can definitely do that. I'm not as big a fan of shooting stuff, especially if you're going to an indoor range. They're not just going to say, sure, bring whatever cardboard and other materials out. It might, they might expect it to have a piece of paper and, like you say, of a dimension that works with their backers or works with their machine or works with their ability to see other lanes. Who knows? It's their business, it's their range. But all you got to do is ask them. You were talking about printing, and I was just going to say, use up your old spray paints. Think of something like a pie pan, and if you just take an old pie pan or a piece of cardboard or whatever, you can make a stencil out of a piece of cardboard, piece of plastic or something. Take a milk jug and make a stencil out of it, and then spray paint. Use your old spray paint cans, and when you find some large piece of paper, whatever, the back of something, some posters that are being thrown away or something, just keep an eye out. The garage sale stuff or the like yard sale type of thing. Sometimes those can be repurposed. Just turn them around, use the side that they didn't use, because they usually just leave them out there after the weekend, or you find those in a pile somewhere where they threw them away. Whatever, you find some stuff to repurpose. Use up your old spray cans like that.
Another thing is, Amazon boxes. Like my wife gets aggravated, and a lot of them, depending on the size, I cut them down. Now I have two different reasons for that. First and foremost is, I've got the range here at the house, and my target backing, wood being so expensive, I take and I'll use that cardboard to cover holes, right? And then I can staple, obviously, targets to that cardboard. But another thing that you can do quite often is take that cardboard and razor box cutter, right, and just cut it into square pieces, panels, and it stacks easier, stores easier. But then you can get the little colored garage sale circles, right?
The stickers.
And
those
those are the little stickers, yeah,
post
and they're super cheap. I mean, like a ton, like at the Dollar Tree, like I don't even know, a pretty good sized package, and
$1.
and pop those on there, several of those on there on one piece, and that's your point of aims, and get after
You're
it.
taking a lot for granted. What if somebody's shooting 9mm? They're going to shoot that little pasty thing, and then their 9mm bullet's going to knock right off of there and not even make a dent. So,
Well, this is true.
you're
I mean,
assuming they're shooting with decent caliber through.
Ricochet factor. Yeah, I didn't consider that. Yeah, I'm thinking about the power of the 22 long rifle, but yeah.
So, and then I was also going to say you can. I used to use toilet paper tube or whatever kind of tube, and you spray paint in the center of that. If you use a light color spray paint, that could be an interesting. If you're looking for like the kind of target where it's 6 rows of 6 or something, and you just got a grid, and you're gonna be shooting 22s at it or something. You spray paint a light color on a dark piece of cardboard or vice versa. Or orange paint is great for target.
Yeah, you can do a lot of.
You can probably do stuff with a stamp or the sponge. So consider using up your old paint on some kind of piece of cardboard or whatever. All right, so that was a whole bunch of impromptu target stuff. I don't know. Did Emery ever say if it was just spoke to him? Yes, I can print. No size restrictions. I just can't print people's faces. Well, again, somebody like politics, people thought back in the 80s, people thought it was hilarious to put politicians' faces on freaking targets. And it was weird, right? And then now somebody takes a picture of that at a range, and that range may or may not have a political affiliation or political thing, but now in the newspaper they do, right? So I don't know. That's it's an optics thing, an image thing, like it's a perception thing, and it's you got a whole bunch of people. So, and some people are like, oh, no big deal, it's just a parody, no big deal, it's just a thing, and other people are like, I can't believe it's so violent, or it's a literal threat, or like people are going to perceive things differently. In freedom, in liberty at least, you don't get to determine what somebody else's perception is. You may not agree with it, you may not like it, but you pretty much, if you want yours, you got to allow other people to have theirs, right? So again, that's where I can totally see faces. And again, when you think the NRA rules, they're essentially the same thing. They're not whittled down. They're just an accumulation of a lot of insight.
I wonder if they consider zombies as people.
Well, that's one of actually that's an interesting thing because that is where those kind of targets came from because people wanted. Remember, I mean, you got to think of like going to gun shows. Kind of fast forward through gun shows over the years.
Yeah.
There were uh, literally the old targets. Like we would just get surplus targets, and surplus targets were like a Nazi jumping over a thing or whatever. So there were some pretty violent, extreme targets back in the day.
Right.
And then there was just somebody wanted to do some Yahoo shit or some ha 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 stuff, or like, oh, I'll be super sarcastic with this. And so your gun show stuff was kind of random, but there weren't like there are today internet publishers. There weren't like distributors like there were, or there was probably some distributors, but right. So I
Right.
think that some of that is the zombie stuff was as soon as you got into police and actual training, paying attention to targets, and you think of like that New York target, you think of like the IPSC target, right? Like once targets became official so that they could do scorekeeping, but also official because they started to have use. Like, are we shooting kill zones? Are we shooting effective areas of a human? Are we training our officers to shoot marksmen or be effective? So as the
Uh-huh.
target started to be more important, I think that's when we started to see the removal of all the features, the hands, the eyes, and the ears, and you just saw silhouettes. And then the zombies were like the resurgence of like, come on, man, like we want to have blah blah blah. So what if we paint them all green and make them totally, what's the word, like uh, totally
Grotesque looking.
outrageous. Yeah, just
Yeah.
outrageous. There's no way. Sort of like the cap guns. Like you can't have cap guns anymore. Well, what if we make them look like space guns and they're totally all neon colors? Okay, I guess you can have a gun again. Is that kind of
Right.
thing. I think
Yeah.
in kind of the big pictures, I think that's where it came from. And of course, the popularity of the show. I mean, that was a mass. That has been a massive, massive, massive show on our culture.
Right. Yeah.
And then people came up with the like splatter targets and the tannerite targets that, now you could take that to another level. And the internet started to make guns normal and you're allowed to have fun with your guns. There's a whole bunch of people. We know people that have such a 9mm up their butt that like guns are tools and got to call them weapons all the time and can't have fun with them or nothing, blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, this and that. Like guns, you can't have,
I do not like calling them
official.
weapons.
I'll never call it a weapon unless it's being
You know,
used as one. But so as a
a
pencil can be a
decade,
weapon.
yeah, a decade plus in 4-H is it broke me from even considering a firearm as a weapon. I mean,
Well, that's interesting
yes,
because the
I mean
reason people say
obviously,
it's a weapon is because of police have to say it's a weapon in court, and that's why people think it's cool
right,
to emulate police. Go ahead.
right, yeah, no, I mean there was a lot of different caveats. I mean when you're dealing with youth, right, and you're dealing with families. I mean you want to make things as benign as possible with your conversation. That's why I use firearm more often than I use gun nowadays, and that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, it was like, anything can be a weapon. Like that's one of the first things in training when when I would train new coaches or whatever. It's like stay away from that. Like anything can be a weapon. Like you could pick up a stick out on their range, and that could be far more of a weapon than the firearm sitting on that table. If you decided to use that weapon to beat somebody with it, like it's a weapon. And if you set them both on the table and there was literally a stick and a firearm, and you ask somebody which one was the weapon, odds are they'd probably tell you the firearm. But truth is, it depends on just what you're using at the time. You know you're assaulting someone basically, right? Um, and so yeah, I've yeah that broke me. Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, I get why people do it. I'm not sitting here saying I don't understand why people have to say weapon. I mean, I understand why they say weapon. I don't subscribe to, except for in those professional circumstances, right? I don't understand why somebody says weapon. I mean, I get it. You get out of the military. I understand that. You've been kind of conditioned and trained maybe to say that. If you're law enforcement, I get it. That's a more both of those are professional settings for that, right? And so I understand. But for me, yeah, you'll never hear me say that. I mean, it's in my estimation, and hopefully, I mean, one of these days, yeah, it'll have to be used potentially. I mean, it can happen that I have to pull one for a defensive use, and when I do, that would be my defensive weapon. I totally get it. But until that time, mine are collectibles. Mine are range toys. Mine are, you know, sporting equipment. There's many other categories they fall in long before they fall into the weapon category.
Or that they can be used as a weapon, but they are in the meantime machines that accomplish all those other things you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, back in the day, let's just think about this. Back in the day when the wonderful mob was running wild because of prohibition, and our illustrious government decided machine guns were just far too dangerous because the mob had them and they had to try to get rid of everything. Um, how many pipes were used? How many baseball bats, right? You got to think the mob was using the crap out of pipes and baseball bats and stuff back in the day, busting kneecaps, right?
Well, that's why brass knuckles and maces and saps are
Right.
illegal, because
Right.
people. Well, the
Right.
thing is, what's sad about that is how do you defend yourself against somebody who's bigger than you? If you've got something to equal the playing field, with brass knuckles in
Exactly.
your pocket. My grandpa's dad carried brass knuckles in his pockets.
Oh yeah.
Back in I guess this would have been, I don't know how many, but our grandpa's dad's era. So yeah, it's
Oh, yeah.
because you get that crap kicked out of you coming home from work or whatever.
Right. It's the equalizer, right?
I don't know if it was an equalizer. You still got to get in a fist fight with somebody. It's just that.
Well, that's true. I
Maybe
mean,
it bends quicker or something.
Well, depending on how big the other guy is, it still may not be an equalizer, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. That's all I'm saying. Yeah,
Or if they get the
especially back
jump
in
on
those
you.
days, they're probably used to getting kicked with their asses with.
If they get jumped on you, somebody cracks you with a baseball bat across the back of the head when you're not looking. It's like, yeah, none of that really does you any good at that point.
All right. Well, we're 2 hours, so we never said it would be a brief conversation on Tuesdays.
2
Hopefully we
hours
address.
is pretty brief.
So we're going to recommend a couple of things. There's Ghost show. Does Ghost have a show today? It's already scheduled.
Yeah, of course. It's Tuesday. Yeah.
But I mean, does he already have one in the books on the list?
Armed Citizen Podcast. Yeah. Hyperion Munitions, I think, is on tonight, if I remember correctly.
And then
our good buddy Casey, who is was, I don't know if he still is, but with Antares, who needs to get their range day back out at SHOT Show. But yeah.
Oh, you mean the Antares?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an interesting question. Back on subject, my range does allow recording. Cool to set a gun pro on bench.
Pro on the bench, yeah.
We could do a chat for sure on techniques and stuff and evolution of filming, because obviously the best is when you got somebody to hold the camera for you who knows what they're doing, and then you just do what you're doing. But then, like you were saying, there's robots that can track and things. So we could probably do that in the future since it's 2 hours in. But that's a great kind of point there from like the previous part of the conversation. I wanted to also mention tonight or this afternoon, Cape Gunworks. Toby from Cape Gunworks goes live with the Grace Curley Show in Massachusetts. So that's a radio show in Massachusetts. It's like a daily political show called the Grace Curley Show. It's kind of like Rush Limbaugh, but she's a girl, and it's in Massachusetts instead of the whole country. And it's in Boston or whatever. So it's like a fairly big radio show from what I understand. So every Tuesday for 45 minutes, they do a 2A Tuesday segment, and Toby comes on and guest hosts as people come in and ask questions. So the Cape Gunworks streams that side of it, their side of it, onto YouTube, and it's a pretty fun conversation because they're paying attention to the chat. They're doing the radio show segment, but then they're also like during the breaks and stuff coming back and having this conversation with the chat, and then it usually spills over at the end. So if you're interested in having some live 2A focused gun related questions, especially from Massachusetts, that's coming up later today. And then I think Pot of Gold has an auction tonight. We'll have to take a look. It's been a while since I've been able to go live and follow one of those. And then today is Tuesday, so that means it's Barbecue's ripoff show, where he does the almost nightly
Firearms Expo conversations on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then we'll go live at the Daily Gun Show at midnight. We had Matt on yesterday. It was a pretty fun conversation. It's been a while since Matt and I just chatted for, 2 hours or something in the middle of the night. Anne Marie asked an awesome question here. Should I get my gun service every year like a car? I'll let Culver take this one.
Should. That question is posed as should. Not necessarily. So, a firearm is not a car. In a lot of sense, that most people, and it kind
These are
of
the clarification here.
depends on how many rounds. Okay, I was curious. Beyond cleaning, if service is necessary. Okay, so this is my experience with most gunsmiths, right? So the question was getting it serviced, not doing it herself. So let's address that first. My experience with most gunsmiths is you're going to take that in and you go, hey, will you service this? Right? What they're going to do is they're going to clean it. They're going to make sure it's clean. They're going to go out back to the range. They're going to run some rounds through it. If it cycles, they're going to give it back to you and they're going to charge you some money basically for cleaning it. Right? If they run some rounds through it and it don't function, then they're going to potentially replace some springs. And we're talking about, or whatever might need replacing, right? But that's something if you're already cleaning and you're already shooting it regularly at the range, you would know if it's having any type of issues, right? So you already kind of know, and at that point you would take it in and say, hey, I'm having this kind of issue. Can you get it lined out? Now, if you've got a less than scrupulous or whatever gunsmith, you're going to take it in and they may charge you an ungodly amount. Who knows that it needed this, that, or the other. And I get, my understanding is Anne-Marie is a new firearm owner, which is awesome. There are gunsmiths that potentially would take advantage of that, right? That naivete or whatever. So I think you would have to be careful. My thing is, if you're already cleaning it, you're already familiar with, taking it down, which you should be, taking it down and cleaning it. Unless you're running and having any issues, right? Feeding issues, you're having hiccups with, that type of stuff. I don't know that I would worry about it that much. If it's any type of a quality firearm, um, no, not really. Now, if you get into, there's a lot of nuance to this, right? So like if you're talking semi-auto versus say revolver. So one thing that can happen with the revolvers is that cylinder, rotates obviously in a revolver. Trying to explain this as simple as possible. And so all of that is timing. As that cylinder comes around and the hammer's coming back and the trigger pull and that hammer has to drop at the exact time that the cylinder has centered that round right where the firing pin can hit it. It's called the timing, right? And so, with the revolvers, especially if you're new and you shot that revolver a lot, um, I don't know. There may be some things having to do with timing that, every year might not be a bad idea to get checked out, by a gunsmith. Just make sure it's not, the timing isn't getting off.
So
And mainly
first off,
because, let me finish this right quick. And mainly, I say that mainly because if you've got a semi-auto and it's like pop and the next round doesn't feed or the case is hung up in the ejection port or something like that, okay, big deal. You clear it. I had a malfunction, big deal, right? If you're talking about an issue with timing on a revolver, it can get off to the point where it's barely off, right? It's not centered up quite perfectly. That way it still goes off. And that bullet, when it gets into the forcing cone and down the barrel, is not quite centered. And it can shave part of the bullet or projectile or something. And you can have that come back on you, almost like a ricochet or a we've all had little flakes of metal when we're shooting steel or something like that come back. Anybody that's had that, and it's that type of scenario. So depending on where it hits you or whatever, if you're wearing iPro, not going to do any major damage. I mean, it may draw a little blood on your cheek or something like that if it hits you in the face. But either way, that timing, so I'm saying on a revolver could get off. So it's a little more I don't even want to say dire, but it's a little more of an issue, I think, with a revolver as you get wear. Anyway, go
All
ahead, G. I'm going to step away for a sec.
Yeah, she has a SIG, so it's not the revolver. But the stuff that Clover's mentioning there would be if you got a lemon, like if you've got a machine that's modern that had a bad part or like a poorly heat treated something or something slipped through some kind of quality check to where it was not operating normally, because these things are all engineered to, if everything's working properly, none of these things that Clover mentioned would happen on a modern one without a lot of use. Now, that's the other thing, is in order to get for the stuff Clover just said there with the revolver, for any of those issues to actually happen with normal wear, that would just be a lot of use. And typically you'd become so familiar with that machine, using it that much, that you'd feel that it's acting differently, and you'd kind of be intuitively knowing that it's getting sloppier and sloppier and something's not right. I'm going to have it looked at. But as far as getting it serviced like a car, it's a SIG, so there are armorers, and Clover is a DIY type, so he's going to look at it like pragmatically or whatever. And it's like one of those things, like, well, you hire a plumber and they come in and they do so. Like if you hired Chris to come in and do something for you, dig a trench, and you're like, well, I could have rented a thing and dug a trench. I didn't, I could have saved a lot of money. Well, you're not paying him for the amount of time he takes. You're paying him for the amount of experience he has that allows him to do it in a relatively effective, efficient amount of time and have it done in a way that's going to be able to button up nice, and you're never going to have to worry about it again. So you're paying them for that experience. And the same with a gunsmith. What Clover described is true. They're going to clean it, probably look at it, clean it. So in other words, evaluate it first, but you're getting their experience, their wisdom evaluating it. They know where to look for stuff. Then they clean it, compare what they saw before and after cleaning to their experience, shoot it. And the party admitted, I think they were a competent gunsmith, is then going to look at it again after they shoot it. They're not just going to shoot it and say, okay, it operated. They're going to look at it and look for those things. So let's say they saw something in the wear pattern, or they saw something in the accumulation of debris in the ejection something, and they go, in my experience, that might mean a cracked something. They clean it, they shoot it, they go look. Nope, sure enough, there is a crack over here. And that's where, if everything goes according to plan, it looks like they just cleaned it, shot it, looked at it, and gave it back to you for $60. But what you're really paying for is that every other time they've done that and they saw the crack, and then now that they didn't see the crack this time. And I'm just trying to play devil's advocate. Like, there's the people that'll say, oh, I know how to change spark plugs. And then there's the people that understand the mechanics who change spark plugs, have seen a million other things. And if they're changing your spark plugs and they see something dripping from this crankcase, they might talk to you about that, even though it's not what you paid them to go under the hood for. So taking it to a place, I'm only going to hesitate to say take it to a place. How about take an armorer's course if you really want to get into it, or maybe take it to a place that's willing to let you look over their shoulder or film a video or something, so that you can, taking it to an expert and saying, here you go, is okay. I mean, if that's the way you want to do it. But if you're trying to learn about it too, try to take it to a class and then say, hey, would you mind during lunch taking me through how I should service this yearly, and have somebody who's, interested to show you that. And then, or there's some NRA basic pistol stuff, I think, that'll cover that. That most gun shops can usually accommodate for like $15. It's like usually a pretty inexpensive class. Anyway, Clover, I don't know if you're back yet.
Yeah, sounds like you elaborated a little. Yeah, I mean, it all boils down to trust. Just like taking your car to a mechanic if you're having a problem. Like, you got to be able to trust your mechanic. Same way, you got to be able to trust your gunsmith. Like, I don't have a problem taking it every year. If you've got a gunsmith that you trust, right? They're competent. You're confident in them. Whatever. Every year, take it in. I don't have a problem with that. But just to randomly, I don't know. I mean, I don't have that much faith in the John Q general public out there, just simply because of, think of the name that mechanics get, right? And I would like to think that gunsmiths being a part of the firearm community we're a much better at being on the level and all of that. Um, but you know, there's bad apples out there. There's just going to be, so got to be careful
Now,
with it.
she's saying, well, they tried to sell you everything, so I trust your opinion more. So that's interesting. If it is something that they had up, like, hey, make sure that you do this. If it does seem like just an extraneous, is that the right word? Like an extra thing, then again, like if you're really curious, then and they're truly interested in making you aware of it, then they're either going to let you look over the shoulder or kind of explain it, or offer some version of an instruction versus a just you can trust us. Jeff had said, does it make more sense to think of the service intervals rather than the rounds? And that's something I guess I was going to say too, is that Clover's talking like worst possible case scenario. And I think it literally needs to be broken or abused in order to get to what Clover's talking about with like modern engineering and modern materials. So right. I think definitely service intervals. Like you buy a gun today and don't shoot it, it's essentially brand new 100 years from now. Like there's very little things that are going to change on that thing, that it isn't brand new perfect. But if you shot it as much as some people shoot who are competitive shooters, let's say, that thing might not last a year. Literally, it's just not designed to last to more than 10,000 rounds, and you just gave it 20,000 rounds.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Round count is more important than time interval. But
and carrying it around. Irrelevant. Look at my.
Good point.
I'm not allowed to pull out my revolver. My little
being exposed to elements.
Ruger, it gets wailed on just because it's always falling on it and smashing into it, jumping out of an airplane, it gets smashed on the side of a building or whatever.
Yep.
Parkour, is hardcore for the guns.
Quit rappelling down skyscrapers, G. Come on now.
I know. Sometimes if you do the parasailing off of there or wear one of them squirrel suits, it's a little better on the guns.
Right.
Let's see. But I think she has got a SIG P320. 320? No, I don't know. I can't keep track of all the SIGs. I let other people keep track of the SIGs and the different model numbers for everything. Okay, so let's not go through too much at 2 hours and a half into this thing into gun questions, but there's plenty of opportunities for that. Well, I think you said Ghost has a guest on tonight. Every once in a while, his Tuesday show will be more random. Sometimes barbecue shows more random. If you really want to bring some gun questions into ours, you could try. I don't have the best gun answers for you usually, but there's definitely other conversations. AR Guns is live on the regular lately. He's had some time, so check out his live conversations for just some general gun chat. And then, of course, Friday evenings is almost the perfect place to bring up some SIG P320 chat with Gizzards is Foul Territory. A couple of hours of live conversation. Oh, I guess the other thing, thanks DJ for dropping the link to it earlier, that I was going to say I should probably check out or talk about more is the campaign we've got going. Owl and Anchor is a company out in California. They do graphic design work. They do production of stuff. And one of their pieces of equipment is a 15-color sewing machine. I call it a robot. And it is up for sale. And it's between me and their neighbor dude who wants to buy it to make hats out of it or make hats with it. And since, they're giving me the opportunity, I figured I would try, and I'm going to look down the right column here. I'm going to try to do a crowdfunding project in order to get that robot. So I'm trying to raise $7,000 so that I can go over there with a fat stack of cash and give it to them for the robot, also pay for the gas and some time in California. They're willing to not just let me buy it, but buy it with, buy it and go over there and hang out and learn how to use it from them. So then once I get it, I would bring it back to Arizona, start whipping out projects with it. They should be able to do, it can do hats, shirts and stuff, but all different kinds of patches. So we need about 140 people to make it happen. So if you're interested, please jump in, be part of it. You've got for the rest of the month here to be part of it. But even if you're not interested or able to participate financially in it, definitely encouraging you, asking you to share the project. I just dropped the link in there. DJ's been dropping the link. Thanks for that. And that will let more people know about it. And that's how these crowdfunding projects go. Some people might think, hey, it's going to be interesting to see what this guy can do with a new robot. and they participate. So your link is technically participating. And if that link brings 2 people in, then you're participating twice as much. So thanks to the people that participate in that. We've got Tony, our friend, Tony Simon is heading out to Arizona this month to be a speaker at our 10th annual 2A rally up in Phoenix. He's doing a deal on his site, on his, it's not Indiegogo, it's a GoFundMe, I believe, for his $5 deal for the SB tactical brace. And he's trying to raise some funds to get out here to Arizona. So if you're interested in sharing or helping get the word out about that, or throwing a couple of $5 at Tony to help him get out here, that would be appreciated as well. Clover, do you got anything? You can have the last of the plugs here.
No, man, don't think so.
All right, we've had the Patreon thing going at the bottom. Both Tony and Clover and I have Patreons. So anybody that's interested in buying us a cup of coffee, Patreon's the perfect place to do it. Till next week, thanks for joining us.